build, and encourage him to talk to the new Health Secretary, which I'm sure he has already written to her on this matter. He is very good at representing his constituents, and he will know all the means in which he can secure a debate on the floor of the House on this important matter for his constituents.
Can I welcome the new SNP spokesperson, Deirdre Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I welcome the Leader of the House to her new position and to say that I look forward to working with her and the Shadow Leader of the House in future. And I'd like to pay tribute to my energetic and witty predecessor who enlivened many a session in this place over many years. I, of course, also welcome the news of the Government's general debate on energy costs today, where the PM will finally detail the support to be offered to our many constituents struggling at this time, but also, I believe, exactly what they plan to do about fracking and increasing oil and gas extraction while remaining committed to their manifesto commitment of net zero by 2050. But, of course, exciting times, Mr. Speaker? An exciting new cabinet packed with exciting new talents, hardline Brexiters, climate change sceptics and free marketers, a new Justice Secretary infamous for being prepared to break international law in a limited and specific way, a Business, Energy and Industry Secretary whose desk doesn't apparently boast a computer and who's on record as being a climate change denier. Obviously, they're raring to go and get stuck in, keen as mustard, like kids on their first week at school, and more announcements to come. Who knows what fresh delights await us? But a couple of questions, Mr. Speaker. Can't you confirm, firstly, if newspaper reports are correct and the so-called Bill of Rights is to the relief of so many finally booted up into the backbenches with the former Justice Secretary, its biggest fan? Or is it only simmering on the government's back burner until the new PM decides once again that just what the long-suffering people of these isles really need is politicians fiddling around with basic human rights that don't need fiddling around with? And finally, other newspaper reports caused quite a stir in Scotland over the weekend by reporting her government plans to introduce a referendum bill setting out the rules under which it will permit the Scottish people a choice in their future again. Will the leader confirm that that is in fact their intention? I'd remind her that if the arbitrary threshold suggested was applied to the Conservative leadership election, then the member for South West Norfolk would not be Prime Minister, and the campaigns to leave the EU, as well as the Conservatives' 2019 election bid, would have fallen well short in England, let alone Scotland. Clearly, the leader's government hasn't learned anything from the last time Scots were cheated out of a result in a referendum in 1917. In 1979. The good news, of course, for us is that such desperate attempts to rig our independence referendum really exposes the desperation in the unionist ranks. They know that when we hold that referendum, we're going to win it.
Yeah. Can I just gently say everybody's doing its new day? It is 2 minutes, and we're almost at 3.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have made a schoolgirl error, I'm afraid, because in my diligent preparation for these questions, I was expecting some questions related to things that matter to the people of Scotland. But never mind, I hope for some in the coming weeks. I'm sorry the Honourable Lady did not feel able to celebrate the diversity of this new cabinet. One thing I would say, which I think all members of it believe in and share, which I would commend to her, despite her criticism of certain members, is that all members of the cabinet believe in holding to the results of referendum, and I think that is a very encouraging thing. We remain committed to our manifesto, and future business will be announced in the usual way.
Pauline Lynn.
Could I also welcome my right honourable friend to her position, which I'm sure she will enjoy and serve with great distinction. This year, on September the 19th, is the Global Awareness Day of aortic dissection. Aortic dissection is a terrible and all too often preventable condition, if it's diagnosed, which has affected my family and affects more than 2,000 families whose loved ones die every year in this country. Please could the leader arrange for a debate in government time to mark this date, and also ask her right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, what her department will do to educate health professionals so aortic dissections are not misdiagnosed including working closely with the Aortic Dissection Charitable Trust?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question and commend the work that she has done in the wake of a terrible tragedy to spare other families what she has had to suffer. I will indeed bring this matter to the attention of the new Secretary of State and Deputy Prime Minister. There has been some encouraging work done by the Royal Colleges of Radiologists and Emergency Medicine to help spot and diagnose this condition in emergency departments, and I thank her again, all members well, for her work.
Sorry. Chair of the Backbench Committee, Ian Manns.
I'm very grateful, Mr Speaker, and can I welcome the new leader to her place and look forward to working with her in the coming weeks and months. And it's refreshing to see that the Deputy Leader is still in his place.
He's as surprised as you are.
And Mr Speaker, and Mr Speaker, can I also apologise for being slightly late. I had just been meeting a delegation of United States congressmen and women upstairs. Mr Speaker, we have an extensive queue of debate applications waiting for chamber time, quite a long list, but we are very much still open for business, particularly for applications that are seeking time for debate in Westminster Hall on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we would welcome applications for debates in Westminster Hall. Some members are already particularly helpful in this respect. Some might say a little too helpful. But we are very much open for business and looking for those applications in coming forward. Thank you.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his remarks. The work of the Backbench Ministers Committee is absolutely critical to enable members to bring forward issues of concern to them. He will know from our conversation yesterday that I am looking at giving him early assurance of time, both on the floor of the House and in Westminster Hall, and I will undertake to do that as swiftly as possible.
Mr Speaker, can I press the leader a little bit on the energy debate, which is starting in probably less than an hour's time? So I asked her yesterday about what information we would have. The WMS hasn't yet been laid. I hope that will be laid shortly. But also, it's usual with a statement that immediately the Minister making the statement has sat down, that statement is then distributed to members in a hard copy form. Can I have her assurance that at the minimum, as soon as the Prime Minister has concluded her speech opening the debate, a hard copy of that statement, of that speech, will be circulated to MPs? It's a very significant announcement, tens of billions of pounds we're expecting, and I think members need at least that level of detail to be able to debate it properly in the 3-hour debate today.
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend for both raising this question today, but also yesterday as well. I am very keen that members of this House are given all the information they need to be able to fully participate in debates and scrutinise government policy. My understanding is that because it is a general debate, that convention doesn't apply. However, we have raised this issue with Bays, and that is the reason a WMS will be tabled imminently, I believe, in good time for the debate this afternoon, and that will contain all the information that colleagues need.
Lloyd Russell-Moyle.
And I want to thank the Leader of the House for her positive response yesterday to my point of order. I want to ask the Leader if the Government will consider a debate on the private rented sector. It is one of the key other pressures on the cost of living crisis in our country at the moment. I'm pleased that they're dealing with, or about to hopefully deal with, the energy crisis, but unless we deal with spiralling rents and ongoing evictions, we will have people in this country suffering this winter. Will the Government bring forward in Government time a debate on this matter?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his remarks. I would be very happy to raise this matter with the Secretary of State. He will know from the Prime Minister's statement that the cost of living and related issues is a priority for this government, and I will certainly take that up with the relevant department.
Dame Andrea Leadsom.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and my apologies for being slightly late due to hobbling over as the result of a sprained ankle. Can I hugely congratulate my right honourable friend on her new post? Speaking from experience, it's the most brilliant job, and I think she will serve with great distinction. And can I also say a huge thank you to the Honourable Member for Perth and North Perthshire, because I think he, as a spokesman for the Scottish Nationalists, has been brilliant and funny all the way through, and wish his successor much luck. But can my right honourable friend assure us that she will not give them any possibility whatsoever for doing anything to tear apart our great United Kingdom while she remains Leader of the Commons?
See, I hope that is my reputation, but as I say, on this side of this House, we respect the results of referendums.
David.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week in my constituency, I visited an Afghan family that have been in a hostel for over 10 months. My constituent has been prevented from earning a living and providing for their family. What they have progressed with is help from health services for antidepressants. What they need is the ability to work. They need a home rather than living out of 2 rooms. They do not wish to remain dependent on the state and at the mercy of the state. So will the Leader of the House speak and urge the new Home Secretary to come to the floor of the House to make a statement on the Afghan citizens' resettlement scheme?
I thank the Honourable Lady for raising this. I would be happy to raise it with the Secretary of State, the Home Secretary. I would also point out that there has been work going on in other government departments across government to remove barriers for enabling people to be able to get into work once they have their paperwork sorted, for example, going into the NHS, or things that we can do through Job Centre Plus to assist people. All ideas from members are always gratefully received, and I will raise that with the Home Secretary.
Lee Brown.
Congratulations to my fellow Hampshire MP on her new role. She will be aware of Junction 9 of the M3. It's a key piece of road infrastructure in our part of the world, to the docks at Southampton and up to the rest of the country. It has been held up while we make new plans in preparation for, or not, smart motorways. The new Prime Minister has been very clear about her opinion of the future of smart motorways, that they will not be proceeded with. So should National Highways now proceed, as they had planned to do so, with the junction outside of the all-running motorway plan?
Well, I thank my honourable friend and fellow Hampshire colleague for his kind remarks. He will know that the Department of Transport has been reviewing how this work has been progressing. I think it is right that we look at the genuine concerns that have been raised about this new technology, but the Department of Transport will continue its plan as has been outlined, but I will certainly raise this matter on his behalf with the new Secretary of State, because clearly his constituents and his local businesses want some certainty in terms of timeframes.
We're a house.
Mr. Speaker, Park Home residents in Bath are facing soaring bills because their pitch fees are linked to the retail price index rather than the lower consumer price index. The previous government committed to changing pitch fees in England if parliamentary times allows. Will the new Leader of the House confirm that this is still the case?
I will certainly raise this with the relevant department and ask them to contact the Honourable Lady. I take it that she will have raised this issue with them before, and clearly there are a number of means that she can secure a debate. But if she has any difficulty in getting an answer to her question, I'll be happy to assist.
Ian Little-Granger.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. May I congratulate my right honourable friend on her new job? She follows in illustrious footsteps. Sir Robert Walpole, both the Pitts, elder and younger, Disraeli, Gladstone and Churchill. But I actually want to bring up something for the leader's help about a historic appointment in Somerset. Mohammed Sadiq will soon take up an official role that was created by Henry VIII. He will get to wear fancy dress, represent our ancient county and welcome visiting dignitaries. But his day job is Director of Wessex Water, a company guilty of pumping thousands of gallons of human filth into my rivers and across the levels. Last year he received 422,000, including a bonus, for actually called protecting the environment. Somerset needs to be consulted about these, and so does the rest of the country. We are not asked about these appointments. Could we please have a debate in government time on senior appointments so MPs have input across the United Kingdom?
Well, on the issues of storm overflows, he will know that we're the first government to have introduced legislation to reduce such discharges. He will fully understand the reason why they are done. The consequences of not doing them is going to be appalling for our constituents. And critically, since 2016, where only 5% of such overflows were monitored, it's now at 90%. Next year it will be 100%. It's not the solution, but it is incredibly helpful to the public. I think that background is helpful in the case the honourable member raises, and clearly he will be as concerned as all of us in this House to get these matters resolved swiftly. I would just finally point out that last year we fined water companies £100 million for not following their obligations.
Chris Bryan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome her to her new job, not least because she got to be leader after all. Admittedly not. Well, and historically, the leader of the government was the leader of the House in the House of Commons, as was just pointed out. And her job is really important in terms of what she just said, in terms of restoring the reputation of this House, because a lot of it started to fall apart with the Owen Paterson debacle last November, and I hope that we can put that behind us, though she voted, of course, for the wrecking amendment at the time. I hope that we can work together to try and bring forward the new Code of Conduct as soon as possible. It's simpler, it tightens up the rules, it provides fairness for all members. There shouldn't be a higher standard for us than anybody else in public life. But there should be standards in public life, and I hope she will explain to us why she's pulled the debate which was meant to be bringing forward the new Code of Conduct next Wednesday.
Well, I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his kind remarks and look forward to our first meeting, whichever one of us initiated it. What I would say to him is I do take these matters very seriously. I hope that is my reputation. I do believe very strongly that this role, as well as serving my government, I also serve this House, and I do understand the full importance of restoring trust and confidence in our politics. I do want to have a conversation with him, but he will already know that we are very sympathetic to the measures in his report, and I am not looking to delay these matters. I do want to fully understand them, get the background from him, and I hope he will take that as a positive.
Marco Longhi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I too warmly welcome my right honourable friend to her new role, and I would also like to start by thanking Mr. Speaker himself for agreeing yesterday to my request to hoist the Brazilian flag in New Palace Yard. This is because yesterday marked a very important day in the Brazilian national calendar. I'd like to thank him also for receiving the Brazilian ambassador, Mr. Fred Arruda. So this is a moment of great pride for all Brazilians worldwide, but also for the large number of Brazilians who work on our estate. So will my right honourable friend join me in celebrating the anniversary of Brazilian independence yesterday, for which Britain played a significant part 200 years ago, as we look forward to growing a strong strategic and trade relationship between our two great countries.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for both his kind remarks and the opportunity to echo the statement that he has made. I might suggest to him as well this could be a topic for an adjournment debate that he may wish to secure, and I thank him for all he is doing with Brazil to strengthen our ties. Thank you.
Drew Hendry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Supported businesses such as Highland Blindcraft in Inverness rely on transitional support grants in order to help them employ a wide range of people with disabilities and help them become a valued member of our workforce. These grants are due to end in April, and there has been no word from the government on the replacement or any information on what's happening, and it's a critical time for these businesses trying to plan. Can we have a statement on when the situation will be rectified and detail on these grants will be given?
Well, I'd be very happy to raise the specific issue that the honourable gentleman speaks about to the relevant Secretary of State. What I would say to him is that one of our achievements has been in halving the disability employment gap. This is of huge importance to this government and continues to be, and we will want to do everything we can to enable that employment and others to continue.
Please, Villiers.
I welcome the Leader of the House to her new role and congratulate her. When will we see on the order paper leasehold reform? This is a difficult technical issue. We need to get it right. We need time to debate it. And there are people suffering now as a result of abusive practices that need to be tackled. I do hope we'll see it on the order paper soon.
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for raising this important point. I will take it up with the relevant department, and business will be announced in the new way, but in the usual way. But I would also encourage her to use all the means that she will be very aware of to secure a debate on this issue. But I shall certainly raise it with the department.
Marcia de Cordova.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So, several small to medium-sized businesses in Battersea have told me how much they are struggling with this cost of living crisis. Soaring energy bills as well as business costs are rising, and then there are also these supply chain and staffing issues as a consequence of Brexit. Now, these small businesses are vital to our local economy and they need help now. So the government must come forward with a plan of support that includes a contingency fund for these businesses. We need to see a cut in business rates and we need to see the energy price cap implemented sooner rather than later. So can we have a statement outlining what support and the plan that the government have for small and medium-sized businesses?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, this is the reason why we have given time for a general debate this afternoon. Many members will have ideas about what support is needed. It is that opportunity this afternoon, later today, to be able to raise those issues and why we have moved government business around to allow that to happen and measures to help her businesses be brought forward.
Nick Fletcher.
I take this opportunity to congratulate my honourable friend into her new position. The Prime Minister yesterday agreed with the Father of the House that local authorities should be allowed by planning law to protect what matters most to them. I believe that should apply as much to Doncaster Sheffield Airport as it does to the Green Belt. The land that our airport sits on has planning consent for use as an airport. Does the Leader agree with me that owners, Peel Holdings, should not be able to close our airport and use the land for anything else?
My honourable friend is an assiduous campaigner on this issue. I know he has raised it many times. There are commercial decisions which do sit with the owners about what their plans are, but I know that he is doing everything within his power to ensure a good outcome for his local constituents, and I am at his disposal if there is anything I can do to assist him in that.
Alistair Carmichael.
Deputy Speaker, in the absence of the debate which we have cancelled for today, will the Leader of the House speak to our colleagues in the Home Office about restoring the Home Office hub that we previously had in Portcullis House? It's the biggest thief of time in my office. Caseworkers having to listen to a message on the helpline saying that there are more than 5 people waiting ahead of them. The Home Office have written to us telling us that they're going to have a series of regional walk-in initiatives. Can she perhaps explain to them that the nearest one of those to my constituency is in Aberdeen, and it will only be a walk-in service when my caseworkers can walk on water? They do brilliant things, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I fear that is still a little bit beyond them.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for raising this point. I have already had some discussions, my office has, with the Home Office about what service they can provide to members of this House. It is absolutely vital, and rather than being a burden on them, actually members of Parliament can be of great assistance in getting cases resolved, and so I will happily do that.
James Gray.
The Arctic Ocean is heating 4 times faster than any other ocean in the world. The sea ice is melting. There are a whole range of other issues. The Arctic Council is not operating. We have minerals, fisheries, a whole series of issues pending with regard to the Arctic. The Foreign Office have promised a new Arctic policy document imminently. They say they've been preparing it for quite a long time. So will my right honourable friend, who I warmly welcome to a new post, find time for a government debate on issues of British relations with the Arctic and perhaps coincide with the launch of that new document?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for raising this important issue. It has always been an important issue, but I think in particular because of what is happening with Russia right now, it is even more pressing. I thank him for raising it. I will bring it up with the Foreign Office, and I would encourage him, as I know he needs no encouragement, to do all he can to secure time on the floor of this House to debate these important issues.
Chris Elmore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome the Leader's appointment. I'm particularly looking forward to exchanges that she and I will have in the Procedure Select Committee, particularly around proxy voting, I'm sure, in the coming weeks. On the weekend, a group of cyclists from my constituency and the Honourable Gentleman from Britons constituency were doing a fundraiser for Prostate Cymru, travelling from Wales down to Portugal. When they arrived at customs in Santander, their bikes were seized and were asked to pay in excess of €10,000 to release the bikes as part of the fundraising effort. Clearly, this has had a huge impact on the fundraising. The cyclists themselves ended up paying €8,500 to release the bikes, which I think the whole House would agree is appalling. It would appear that it was to do with a post-Brexit form linked to importers who were trying to sell goods in Spain. Clearly this was a cycling fundraising event. So I'd be grateful if the Leader could make representations to the Foreign Secretary around providing more support to charities such as Prostate Cymru on what forms do need to be completed, and also to work with the Spanish government to ensure that this doesn't happen again for much needed funds for charities.
I'm very sorry to hear of this. There should have been no reason why they had that difficulty. I think that is outrageous, and I would take this opportunity to remind colleagues about the excellent consular service that the Foreign Office run. I had an incident where a constituent was in real danger, and through the consular service, within half an hour of me making that initial call, the local police force in the United States were on the doorstep of that individual. I would encourage people to use that facility, and I will do all I can to help resolve and get compensation for the group of cyclists he mentions.
Nicola Richards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate my right honourable friend to her new position. I know she'll do a fantastic job. Madam Deputy Speaker, sadly I wasn't shocked by Sandwell Council's latest attempt to threaten and silence residents who are being let down by the Labour-run council. Residents who complain about their child's special educational needs and disabilities travel service now face their transport provision being removed for good. Their latest terms and conditions reads, "Please don't use social media to make a complaint, as it may result in your child's transport being suspended or removed permanently." And this is after the scandal around these contracts being awarded on the basis of friendships. We really have hit a new low. Can I ask the Leader of the House to advise me on whether we can have a debate on Sandwell Council's ongoing SEND provision?
Well, that is very shocking and sad to hear. It is absolutely the case that local authorities have a statutory duty to provide free home-to-school transport for eligible children of compulsory school age, and it would not be lawful for a local authority to withdraw transport from an eligible child on the grounds that a parent has complained. I think that is an outrageous thing. The Honourable Lady will know what to do to secure a debate, but I will raise this issue on her behalf with the relevant department. I think it's a shocking indictment of that council.
Ian Paisley.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate the new Leader of the House? I'm personally very pleased for her and wish her all the very best in this role. This morning, the Northern Ireland Research Agency produced statistics that Northern Ireland has had 340 excess deaths in the last 10 weeks. That's a 16% increase over the last 5 years, and is devastating, obviously, for those families and for those people. And it's largely due because of delayed diagnosis, and also the cancer statistics are still not published, which means that this will be even higher in the next few weeks. I'm wondering at what point of the crisis in the health service in Northern Ireland will the Health Minister here be able to step in with emergency provision, emergency organisation. I wonder if the business leader can raise this urgently with the Health Secretary.
Well, that is very hard to hear. I think one of the strengths of our National Health Service across the United Kingdom is that it is devolved and it is run in slightly different ways. And the chief medical officers, I know, work together very closely to share good practice, to learn from each other and strengthen the system as a whole. I will certainly raise his concerns with the new Secretary of State, but he will know that we are doing everything we can to restore a government in Northern Ireland so these issues can be gripped and dealt with.
Robert Walker.
Warmly welcome my right honourable friend to her place. I think she'll be a fantastic champion for this House, and I welcome the speed with which the government is bringing forward measures to address the energy crisis. Alongside that, in my inbox, the #1 issue from constituents is the fate of future of the Worcester Warriors Rugby Club. Professional rugby has been played at Six Ways for all of my adult lifetime, but this is now under threat due to the dire financial situation at the club. 5 Worcestershire MPs have written together to both the incoming and the outgoing Secretary of State for DCMS, and I'm delighted, thank you, Madam Speaker, that the Speaker has allowed for an adjournment debate on this issue on September the 19th, but I fear that may be too late. We need urgent action by the DCMS, the Premier Rugby and the RFU to save the future of this club. Are there any opportunities for me to raise this issue even sooner than Monday after next?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the work that he and his local colleagues are doing to secure this club's future. He has done exactly as you would expect him to do so in securing that debate. But time is of the essence. I will happily raise this issue on his behalf and ensure that the new Secretary of State realises it is a priority. We have previously assisted clubs in, even if it is just buying them a bit of time, and I know that the new Secretary of State will be keen to do all they can to assist.
Peacock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Government have taken £4.4 billion from the Mine Workers Pension Scheme today. The cross-party Bay Select Committee report concluded that the Government should not be in the business of profiting from miners' pensions. Myself and 50 colleagues wrote to the 2 leadership candidates last month about this. We are yet to receive a reply. So can I ask, can we have an urgent statement from this new Government on this scandal?
Well, I thank the honourable lady for raising this matter. She can clearly raise it as a question to that department or seek to secure a debate, but I would be happy to notify the relevant department that is a concern to her and ask them to get in touch.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Before the recess, I raised the plight of Badara Jabakile, a young Afghan boy who became separated from his family when they fled Afghanistan. Very sadly, he ended up in Paris, while the rest of the family ended up here. Over the last 12 months, his solicitor, the family and my office have been trying to get him reunited with his family. The good news is, yesterday he arrived at King's Cross and he was united with his twin brother. However, this highlights the problems there are of both Afghan refugees and other refugees who are separated from their families across the world. Equally, 11,000 Afghan refugees are still in hotels in this country. So can we have a debate in government time on the plight of refugees and how we can ensure we short-circuit this and get people into decent homes that they can make their own?
Well, I know my honourable friend is an assiduous campaigner on these issues and continues to raise his concerns, but also concerns shared by many members of this House. I know that the new Home Secretary will be looking at these issues and also asking other government departments to grip these issues. I will be happy to raise this issue on his behalf and will certainly encourage the Home Office to, as I mentioned before, to be as helpful to members of this House in resolving these cases.
Richard Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Marie Curie's Dine in Poverty campaign is calling for urgent action from the UK to safeguard terminally ill people and their families against poverty at the end of their lives. Will the Leader of the House make a statement setting out her support for this campaign, and will she use her good offices to urge her Cabinet colleagues to do likewise and put an end to the shameful indictment of our society where people die in poverty?
Well, I thank the honourable lady for raising this issue. She will know that there is something in today's business where members will be able to make some progress on this issue. But I know it's connected to a whole raft of things, and I'll be happy to point the new Secretary of State towards the Honourable Lady's concerns.
Anthony Mangnall.
Deputy Speaker, there aren't really enough hours in the day to speak about fishing and farming, but with that in mind, could the Leader of the House please give us more time in DEFRA questions to be able to ask questions on rural affairs?
Thank you. Thanks to the Honourable Gentleman for reminding all of us in this House of the vital importance of farming, fishing and rural affairs. I shall certainly talk to the new Secretary of State about his concerns.
Barry Sherman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I warmly welcome the new Leader of the House and look forward to our Thursdays together. But can I remind her that the lovely Cheryl Gillam some years ago managed to get the Autism Act through this place. Could we have an early debate on the fact that autism is a very important issue for so many families in this country? And up and down the country, many local authorities are ignoring the Act, failing to put it into operation and leaving families in a dreadful state of despair. Could we have an early debate on it?
Well, I thank the Honourable Gentleman for reminding us of the service that Cheryl Gillam performed, one of the many services she performed for this House in bringing that Act in, supported by many members of this House. It has been in operation for some time, and I think we should look at how it is performing. I would encourage him to apply for debates in the usual manner, but I will be happy to raise it with the several relevant departments so that they can consider his request.
Elaine Saxby.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate and welcome my right honourable friend to her new position. Following the shocking fire 10 days ago at beautiful Baggy Point in my stunning North Devon constituency, caused by a disposable barbecue blowing up from the beach onto the Tinder Dry Gorse, please can we have an urgent debate in government time to consider banning these dangerous and unnecessary items from our open spaces?
Well, this was a particularly shocking incident. Natural fires are a tragedy in themselves, but when it is preventable and has been caused by such an event, it is very depressing. The government is ensuring that disposable barbecues are safe and include clear instructions to use, but clearly there is a lack of awareness about the potential of what might happen, and I thank the Honourable Lady for raising awareness of that today, and I know she will continue to do so, and I'll be happy to raise the issue with the Department.
Alan Brown.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Keepmoat Homes built a new housing estate in my constituency offering people dream homes. However, many constituents had issues with snagging that they struggled to resolve. There was actually a land grab by Keepmoat where some gardens are smaller and shown in the title deeds of the houses purchased. The general upkeep of the estate is very poor, strewn with weeds, and general maintenance is lacking. And adjacent land still owned by Keepmoat is effectively a wasteland. Keepmoat Homes keep fobbing off my office, promising to get back to us and never do, while of course they're making more money building houses elsewhere. So can I get a statement from the Leader of the House on how we can hold these so-called reputable companies to account and make them fulfil on their promises?
Well, he has certainly raised awareness of the conduct of that company today on the floor of this House and done his constituents a service in the process. He will know that he will be able to secure perhaps an adjournment debate so to further discuss what this business is and isn't doing.
Jonathan Cullis.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Earlier this week, Stoke-on-Trent City Football Club were proud to host our heroines, the Lionesses, as they stormed to a 10-0 victory over Luxembourg in their World Cup qualifier in front of a 24,000-strong crowd. It was a tremendous boost to the city of Stoke-on-Trent and a great showcase for women's football. So will my right honourable friend join me in congratulating the Lionesses in their victory? And can we secure parliamentary time to debate how we can improve access and opportunity for girls and women across our country to get into football?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for again reminding us of the Lionesses' tremendous and continuing track record in bringing glory to our nation. I'm happy to say that it was announced this week that former England and Great Britain footballer Karen Carney, MBE, is to chair an in-depth review into the future of domestic women's football, which will look at how we deliver both growth to elite and grassroots level football. And next week there is a Westminster Hall debate vote on the 2022 UEFA European Women's Championship and participation of girls and young women in sport, and I would encourage all members to contribute to that debate.
Florence Ashlomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 25th of August, my constituent Victoria Bauman and her husband were arrested in Neymar for alleged visa offences as they returned from the city of Shan State. Ms Bauman served as the UK's ambassador to Neymar, and the Neymar Centre for Responsible Business said that she has dedicated many years in strengthening social and economic development in Neymar. She is an upstanding citizen who served our country with distinction, and these charges appear politically motivated. So can the Leader of the House please discuss this with the Foreign Secretary and look at how we can urgently help my constituent and her husband?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for raising this issue. I shall pass her concerns on to the Foreign Office, and I would encourage her to make contact with the new Foreign Secretary to discuss these matters directly.
Sean Bailey.
Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, it was great to see my right honourable friend in her place today as she takes her position. I just want to warmly congratulate her. Samuel Metropolitan Borough Council were awarded £20 million by this government for a family hub, and we all know that how you start in life unfortunately still dictates sometimes where we go, and we need to change that, and a family hub can do that. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm campaigning along with local campaigners to ensure that there is a family hub located in Harville's Hawthorne in my constituency in West Bromwich. Now, the Harville's Hawthorne Primary School have the site, they have the connections, and they have the networks by which to build this. We just need to get Sandwell Council on board to do so. Will my right honourable friend give us a debate in government time, perhaps make representations in government to support the campaign to get a family hub at Harville's Hawthorne Primary School in West Bromwich?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and indeed a former Leader of the House who is here in the chamber today has done a huge amount of work on early years and encouraging these family hubs. He is right to campaign so hard for one in his constituency, and I'd be very happy to help him achieve that objective. What I would say is this particular council is featuring greatly in business questions today, and I think maybe honourable members should club together in their application for a debate, whether it is on denying people who have special education needs, transport, or indeed being a block on family hubs being set up in constituencies.
Carol Monaghan.
This week I received a rather predictable response from the Home Office. Thank you for your further inquiry on behalf of X about his application for Y. X's application is under consideration and we will contact him as soon as a decision is reached. It was predictable because it's the same response I get every time I contact the Home Office. Now, this week, the Home Office sent us a letter that says now they will be contacting our offices to update them by telephone, not by email. Now, call me a cynic, but we lose a paper trail when it's an email update. So can we have a government statement on what has been done about these unacceptable delays in Home Office correspondence and applications from our constituents?
Order. If we are to get everybody in, we do need quite short questions. Leader of the House.
I'm aware of the correspondence that the Home Office have sent out. I very much doubt whether that correspondence had any ministerial oversight on it. I have raised it with the Home Office and said that our view is that this is not an acceptable service for members, and I think they do not understand that having a letter with a substantive answer is very helpful to members in terms of getting information to their constituents. I have raised it both with the Home Office and with the Cabinet Office, and will do all I can to ensure that members of this House get the service they and their constituents need.
Scott Benton.
Mr. Speaker, may I welcome my right honourable friend to her new position on the front bench. 28,000 migrants have now crossed the Channel this year, and I'm afraid that our inability to control our borders is becoming increasingly difficult to defend to my constituents. Can we expect a statement from the new Home Secretary on this issue and the further measures the government will be taking to address this?
I think you can expect to hear from the new Home Secretary soon on these matters. It is a key priority for her, and in addition to statements, you will also see action.
Dan Jarvis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I warmly welcome the Leader of the House to her important new role, and I wish her well with it. I suspect the Right Honourable Lady has been studiously looking at the commitments the Prime Minister has made over the course of the summer, so she will know that in a speech in Leeds on the 28th of July, the Prime Minister committed to build the Northern Powerhouse Rail Link to join up communities and unlock potential right across the north. That is hugely significant for the north of England, and I know the Metro Mayors in West Yorkshire, Tracy Brabin, and South Yorkshire, Oliver Coppard, are very keen to talk to the government. So can the Leader speak to the new Transport Secretary so we can get early sight of the government's intentions with this regard?
Leader of the House.
Like him, very pleased to hear that commitment from our new Prime Minister. The timing, but also the sequencing of these various schemes will be of huge interest to many members of this House, and I think it is a prime topic for a debate, and I would encourage him to apply for one.
Daisy Cooper.
On the 13th of May, almost 4 months ago, I wrote to the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care about a constituent who suffered a serious sexual assault at the hands of a medical professional. My research has shown that there is no support available for these kinds of people, no progress on implementing the recommendations of 3 inquiries, and no systematic collection of data. I chased up with the Secretary of State on the 21st of July, the 10th of August, and yesterday on the 7th of September. Could the Leader of the House please confirm she will now write to the new Secretary of State and ensure that my constituent, having been incredibly courageous, will get a response to my letter of almost 4 months ago?
Well, I'm very sorry to hear about the case of the Honourable Lady's constituent. I shall certainly raise this matter and draw it to the attention of the new Secretary of State.
Ruth Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I wish the Leader well in her new role, obviously an apprenticeship to the top job. On the steps of Downing Street this week, the new Prime Minister failed to mention Wales once, and that's not gone unnoticed in Wales and in my constituency of Newport West. So, can we have a debate in government time on the lessons the party opposite can learn from the long-term and successful Welsh Labour government, because there are plenty of them?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. I would slightly take issue with the success rate of the Welsh Government on a number of fronts, but in the spirit of cooperation, I shall encourage her to apply for an debate so that we can have that discussion on the floor of the House.
Chris Law.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've requested meetings with the Home Office to discuss the exceptional case of a young woman from Afghanistan who's been offered a place to study nursing at University of Dundee. This is an absolutely urgent case, and it's vital this is resolved prior to the start of a course this month. I also understand it's on the ministerial desk awaiting approval. So can the Leader of the House advise members on what they can do to raise urgent cases with ministers, and will she help facilitate a meeting for me with colleagues in the Home Office?
I shall be happy to facilitate meetings if the Honourable Gentleman is having difficulty securing them. And as I have said today and yesterday, I'm sure the Home Office will want to give clarity to precisely the support it will give members to resolve such issues.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if I may, given the new Leader of the House's experience of the fantastic Inspire Sports Centre in Luton South, will she join me in congratulating Amy Rollinson from Luton Diving Club on her bronze medal in the Commonwealth Games? But if I can quickly ask, given the devastating floods in Pakistan, a third of the country is underwater, 35 million people are affected, over 1,200 dead, please can we have an urgent debate about UK aid to Pakistan?
Well, I will happily join her in giving her the congratulations that she outlined for the achievements in diving in her constituency. She will know that we have given many millions in aid money to help with the situation in Pakistan, and our High Commission there is doing all it can to assist the government in the very difficult circumstances that they are facing. And I would encourage her and others to apply for debates in the usual manner.
Chris Stevens.
A remedial order can only take effect after 60 sitting days after it's been laid down. We've been waiting far too long for the second remedial order to be laid down for bereavement support payments for cohabiting couples. Yeah. Can the Leader tell us when the government plan to lay down that second remedial order?
Well, I'm very aware that because these are sitting days, this is a longer period of time, and there are many issues that honourable members have raised today that do need to be dealt with swiftly. I am having discussions with my team and the Deputy Leader of the House about how we can ensure the measures that are urgently needed are brought forward in the swiftest possible time.
Delays to cancer treatment can be a matter of life and death. Yet the government is still not meeting 7 of the 9 urgent referral cancer targets. Could we have a debate in government time about how we can improve the situation for those waiting their cancer treatment?
I thank the honourable gentleman for raising this issue. Much of the waiting list pressures that the NHS is under is because of diagnostics, and I know it will be a key focus for the new Secretary of State. I would encourage him to apply for a debate in the usual manner.
Speaker, let me congratulate the Leader of the House on their appointment. My constituency celebrates 2 very important anniversaries this year. First of all, the 150th anniversary of the foundation of the Sons of the Rock, Dumbarton FC, which 2 members of my family have actually played for, and also, of course, the 800th anniversary of the Royal Borough of Dumbarton, founded by our late King Alexander II, by the grace of God, King of Scots. So I wonder, will the Leader of the House not only congratulate Dumbarton FC, but the people of Dumbarton and their ancient history, but also say it's about time we recognise the value of sport and also our great boroughs across these islands.
Well, I'm very happy to join the honourable gentleman in congratulations of both those achievements, and I wish them well in future years.
Davies-Jones. Speaker, shamefully unnecessary delays to the online safety bill has allowed dangerous misogyny and right-wing extremism to perpetuate online for far too long. We know young boys are especially susceptible to this, and more turning to the dark web in an attempt to find a place of belonging and acceptance. Will the Leader of the House therefore commit to a debate in government time to look at how we can tackle this way of radicalisation before it is too late?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for raising this and point her to the remarks the Prime Minister made yesterday about our commitment to that bill. Its progress is very important, and obviously members will be able to contribute to that. But if she wishes to have a further debate, I would encourage her to apply for one in the usual way.
Gareth Thomas. Narendra Mishra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I pay tribute to all firefighters in Stockport and across the country who work in very difficult conditions to keep people safe. Shockingly, data from the Fire Brigades Union shows that between 2010 and 2021, we lost 631 full-time firefighter roles in Greater Manchester. This is unacceptable and poses a real threat to the public, where fire and rescue services may not be able to deal with every incident and fight all fires. As the new Prime Minister starts the term, there's a real opportunity to properly invest in the fire services again. So will the Leader of the House allow a debate in government time on funding for the fire and rescue services in Greater Manchester in light of the years of cuts?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for raising this question. These matters are for local people to decide, but clearly the shape of the fire service is changing. They're taking on additional roles as well as their traditional ones, and that will be a concern for many members across this House, and I would encourage him to apply for a debate in the usual way.
According to a UK finance report, push payment fraud rose by 39% last year. Wow. That's no surprise to me, having spent the summer discussing this with affected constituents. So I think that more teeth are needed. We need to find a way to make sure we have proper redress for consumers and businesses affected, and a way of dealing with banks who are hosting the accounts which are benefiting from these high-value frauds. So can we have a debate in government time on what more can be done here to make sure that we put an end to this very damaging and increasing fraud?
Well, the Honourable Lady raises an important issue. I know that this has been a focus for the Treasury in recent months, and certainly that if she would apply for a debate, I'm sure many members would wish to contribute.
Liz Twist.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Sunday marks World Suicide Prevention Day. And yesterday, I, along with the Right Honourable Member for North Durham, Matthew from If You Care Share,
who is raising funds to support the work of the charity, running from Durham to 10 Downing Street. Can I ask for a debate in Government Town so that we can discuss suicide and self-harm prevention and the Government's revision of the strategy?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for raising that important issue, and I wish her constituent well on his mission to raise awareness and funds for this important cause. I will happily raise the issue with the relevant Secretary of State, and I'm sure if she were to secure a debate, and I would encourage her to apply for one, many members of this House would wish to contribute.
Gerald Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the summer, like many other members, I'm sure, my office team have continued to experience considerable delays in contacting the MP account management team at UK Visas and Passport Office. Twice in the last few days, staff have spent over 2 hours on the phone getting to an advisor, and then the advisors are not able to give information, only read from a screen and not give assistance on complex cases. So could I ask the Leader of the House please to arrange a debate in Government Time to talk about what action the Government can take to ensure members are provided with the support so that we in turn can give that support to our constituents?
Well, he will know that the Home Office has done a huge amount to improve this service, taking on in recent months over 1,000 new staff to be able to process such applications. But he is right, there is no point in having an MP's service and hotline if answers are not at the end of it, and I shall certainly continue to ensure the Home Office is able to deliver the services that members of this House need and would welcome.
Welcome the Leader to her place. My office are currently supporting several single mothers who continue to struggle with the child maintenance system because the support in chasing down avoiding paying parents or enforcing repayment of large arrears just doesn't exist in a meaningful way within the current system. Will the Leader of the House ask the new Work and Pension Secretary to give a statement to the House on improving the existing system for them and the many single parents across the UK who are single-handedly carrying the financial and emotional burden of raising their children?
I thank the Honourable Lady for raising this, and I will happily pass on her concerns to the new Secretary of State. DWP questions are scheduled for the 17th of October, and I would encourage her to raise that issue in those questions as well.
Jim Shannon, final question.
Mr. Speaker, I declare an interest as Chair of the APPG of Pakistan Religious Minorities and also as Chair of the APPG for Freedom of Religious Belief. With that in mind, I note with concern the horrific floods and devastation and loss of life in Pakistan over the recent weeks, and I'm glad to hear of various initiatives from this government to deliver aid to help alleviate the impact of the damage on people's lives. Will the Leader of the House be able to allow a statement on the importance of this aid reaching all in need in Pakistan, particularly those who belong to other religious groups such as Christians and Ahmadis who face systematic challenges in receiving the aid that they very much need?
Well, he will know historically that the largest share of our aid budget has gone to Pakistan, and as a consequence we have a deep and well-informed relationship on how that aid money is utilised, and I know that our High Commission there will be ensuring that it is distributed both to give the maximum positive impact for everyone, but also to make sure that there is no discrimination in how it is distributed.
We now come to Business House motion. Minister to move.
I beg to move.
Question is the Business House motion as on the order paper. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Before we start the debate, I want to put on record that I am very disappointed that the written ministerial statement, which is relevant to it, has not yet or just been made available in the last 5 minutes. Such statements should be made available whenever possible at 9:30 a.m. when they are relevant to the debate like today. It is doubly important that they are available in good time. I'm sorry this has happened, and I consider it discourteous to the House. I hope this is not the new government in the way that it intends to treat the House. I'm going to take it down as bad management or incompetence rather than deliberate.
Very generous.
Right. We now come to the general debate on UK energy costs. Before I call the Prime Minister to open the debate, I would like to point... Just a minute. I don't think that's the day today after the way this House has been treated. I'm defending you as the backbenchers. I expect a little bit more decorum at this stage. Before I call the Prime Minister to open the debate, I would like to point out the British Sign Language interpretation of the opening speech in the debate is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. I now call the Prime Minister. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion. Earlier this week...
Prime Minister, just 1 second. We've started the debate. I don't want any more from that particular bench. If we do, I go and get that cup of tea early. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion. Earlier this week, I promised I would deal with the soaring energy prices faced by families and businesses across the UK. And today I am delivering on that promise. This government is moving immediately to introduce a new energy price guarantee that will give people certainty on energy bills. It will curb inflation and boost growth. This guarantee, which includes a temporary suspension of green levies, means that from the 1st of October, a typical household will pay no more than £2,500 per year for each of the next 2 years while we get the energy market back on track. This will save a typical household £1,000 a year. It comes in addition to the £400 energy bill support scheme. This guarantee supersedes the Ofgem price cap and has been agreed with energy retailers. We will deliver this. Mr. Speaker, I will make way in a few minutes when I have made some progress. Mr. Speaker, we will deliver this by securing the wholesale price for energy while putting in place long-term measures to secure future supplies at more affordable rates. We are supporting this country through this winter and next, and tackling the root causes of high prices so we are never in the same position again. For those using heating oil, living in park homes, or those on heat networks, we will set up a fund so that all can...
Prime Minister, sorry about this. Can I just say, I don't want a running commentary from here and giving me the advice. I certainly don't need it. Prime Minister, I don't want to interrupt you. It's up to you to give way when you feel it's appropriate. But just to let you know that it is now being printed, the WMS, and I'm hoping that we'll bring it into the chamber for everybody to see. Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. For those using heating oil, living in park homes, or those on heat networks, we will set up a fund so that all UK consumers can benefit from equivalent support.
I thank her for giving way. National Energy Action estimate with the cap at the current level are 6.5 million households in fuel poverty. So raising the cap to £2,500, how many more millions of people will end up in fuel poverty, does she reckon?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are taking action to help people on the lowest incomes through universal credit, and we are also supplying £400 through the Energy Bills Support Scheme. Mr. Speaker, I would like to make some progress and then I will take more interventions. We will also support all businesses, charities and public sector organisations with their energy costs this winter, offering an equivalent guarantee for 6 months. After those 6 months, we will provide further support to vulnerable sectors such as hospitality, including our local pubs. My right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will work with business to review where this should be targeted to make sure those most in need get support. This review will be concluded within 3 months, giving businesses certainty. In the meantime, companies with the wherewithal need to be looking for ways they can improve energy efficiency and increase direct energy generation. I will give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister giving way, and I commend her on the speed with which she and her new team really grip this challenge that's facing the country. And doesn't it demonstrate, Mr. Speaker, that Conservative governments do not stand by while millions of people on low incomes are threatened? The measures she's taken.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. I recognise that people are struggling with their energy bills, and that is why I have brought forward this debate as soon as possible to give people reassurance ahead of this winter that energy bills are going to be affordable. And we will be bringing forward emergency legislation to deliver this policy. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, will set out the expected costs as part of his fiscal statement later this month. And I can tell the House today that we will not be giving in to the Leader of the Opposition who calls for this to be funded through a windfall tax. That would undermine the national interest by discouraging the very investment we need to secure homegrown energy supplies. If the honourable members will allow me to make a bit more progress, I may be able to answer their questions before they've asked them. But, Mr. Speaker, the party opposite need to understand...
Prime Minister. Sorry, Prime Minister. A point of order, Kevin Brennan.
Copies have been made available to some members of the written ministerial statement, but there aren't enough for everybody. Is it possible, if I might finish this point of order, is it possible that sufficiently so that we can all see it?
As we both know, it's not a point of order, but it's certainly a clarification that they're now coming out, and we're printing them as fast as possible to make sure all members have the ability to read it. It is with great disappointment, but that's a matter of fact. Prime Minister. Prime Minister.
Instead of that approach, we are taking an approach which is pro-growth, pro-business, and pro the investment we need for our country's energy security. I will give way.
Very grateful to the Prime Minister. Does she agree that we are too short of energy but have plenty of taxes? And does she agree that if we had an oversupply of taxes, as the party opposite wants, we'd have less supply of the things we were taxing?
My right honourable friend makes an extremely good point. The reality is we can't tax our way to growth. And the policy I am setting out today is all about helping people with their energy costs, as I promised, and making sure that we have the long-term energy supplies that we need for our country. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman at the back.
Thank you to the Prime Minister for giving way. Just 6 months ago, households faced energy bills of £1,300. We are today being told that fixing prices at £2,500 is the best that the government can do. It's not. So why is the Prime Minister putting private energy profits ahead of people at this crucial time?
Well, what we are doing is we're doing the important work to help people and businesses get through this winter and next winter, whilst fixing Britain's long-term energy supplies. I've already given way a number of occasions. I will give way later. Please hold off for a bit longer. Mr. Speaker, this is the moment to be bold. We are facing a global energy crisis, and there are no cost-free options. There will be a cost to this intervention. I will give way.
I strongly welcome this package of bills to help cover. It's a marked contrast to the meagre scrappings offered by the benches opposite. Can she? I just welcome also that she's confirmed that schools and colleges will get help with their energy bills, as the colleges face increases of 300%. And could I just finally ask her, will she continue to bear down on fuel duty? Because we know that motorists at the pumps face extortionate bills when they fill up their cars.
Yeah. Well, I thank my honourable friend for his point, and I'm sure the Chancellor of the Exchequer is listening intently to his point ahead of his fiscal statement later this month. Mr. Speaker, I want to make some progress on explaining how we will defray the cost of this intervention, which I think might answer some of the honourable people's questions before they ask them. So the way we are going to defray the cost of this intervention is first of all by ramping up supply. Following on from the successful vaccine task force, we have created a new energy supply task force under the leadership of Maddie McTernan. They are already negotiating new long-term energy contracts with domestic and international gas suppliers to immediately bring down the cost of intervention. We are also accelerating all sources of domestic energy, including North Sea oil and gas production. We will be launching a new licensing round, which we expect to lead to over 100 new licences being awarded. And we will speed up our deployment of all clean and renewable technologies, including hydrogen, solar, carbon capture and storage, and wind, where we are already a world leader in offshore generation. Renewable and nuclear generators will move on to contracts for difference to end the situation where electricity prices are set by the marginal price of gas. This will mean that generators are receiving a fair price reflecting their cost of production, further bringing down the cost of this intervention. I will give way to my honourable friend.
I warmly welcome the immediate action announced by the Prime Minister on the cost of energy, which is really going to help families in the Pendle constituency and right across the United Kingdom. Next week in Parliament is Nuclear Week. So will she join with me in supporting the rollout of small modular reactors championed by Rolls-Royce, who have 2 sites in my constituency? We need this technology now, so will she go further and faster to drive forward the nuclear programme in this country?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. Small modular reactors are a very important part of our energy mix. They're produced here in the United Kingdom. They will help boost growth as well as boost our energy security. And secondly, I will take a few more interventions in a few minutes, but please let me make progress on my speech. Secondly, today's actions will deliver substantial benefits to our economy, boosting growth, which increases tax receipts and gives certainty to business. This intervention is expected to curb inflation by up to 5 percentage points, bringing a reduction in the cost of servicing government debt. Thirdly, I'm announcing today that with the Bank of England, we will set up a new scheme worth up to £40 billion to ensure that firms operating in the wholesale energy market have the liquidity they need to manage price volatility. This will stabilise the market and decrease the likelihood that energy retailers need our support, like they did last winter, by increasing supply, boosting the economy and increasing liquidity in the market. We will significantly reduce the cost to government of this intervention. I will give way.
Very kind of the Prime Minister to give way to so many sensible members. Today is clearly a big intervention, and the government is, as she promised, wrapping its arms around my constituents, as we did during the pandemic, and looking to the future. Can she confirm that the plans are primarily about domestic supply rather than imported reliance, and therefore in line with the commitments, the important commitments that we made at COP26 in Glasgow and the path to net zero that we made in our manifesto 3 years ago.
Well, I am completely committed to net zero by 2050, and as well as dealing with the immediate situation we face, we are also dealing with the root causes. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Very grateful for Prime Minister Wayne. Can I welcome her to her place and hope she will work with opposition parties in the national interest. But can she confirm that her announcement today will still see the energy bills of struggling families rising by another £500 next month, and that this winter they will be paying energy bills twice the bills that they paid last winter?
Well, we're also, at the same time as introducing the energy price guarantee, also providing families with £400 and providing extra support to the vulnerable. So vulnerable families will be receiving that extra support. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to move on to why we are in the situation we are in now. And the fact is that energy policy over the past decades has not focused enough on securing supply. There is no better. I don't know why, Mr. Speaker, I don't know why the honourable gentleman is laughing. He is partly responsible for this. There is no better example than nuclear, where the UK has not built a single new nuclear reactor in 25 years. And it's not just about supply. The regulatory structures have failed, exposing the problems of having a price cap applied to retail but not to the wholesale market. All of this has left us vulnerable to volatile global markets and malign actors in an increasingly geopolitical world. And that is why Putin is exploiting this situation by weaponising energy supplies as part of his illegal war on Ukraine. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Would she accept that with 150 years' worth of gas under the ground in GB, it is absolute madness to turn our back on that resource at a time when people are facing huge energy bills? And could she also just explain to us how she intends to deliver the support which she's talking about in Northern Ireland?
That's the people from Ireland.
Well, I do agree with the honourable gentleman. I'm coming to the point about shale gas in a minute, but I can assure him that this policy will apply in Northern Ireland, and those benefits will be open to the people of Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom. So, as well as the action that I am announcing today, we will use these 2 years ahead of us to make sure that the United Kingdom is never in this situation again. So I will be launching 2 reviews. Firstly, a review of energy regulation to fix the underlying problems. We want a new approach which will address supply and affordability for the long term. Secondly, we will conduct a review to ensure we deliver net zero by 2050 in a way that is pro-business and pro-growth. And this review will be led by my right honourable friend, the member for Kingswood. I will give way to him.
Can I firstly, on behalf of the people of South Leicestershire, welcome my right honourable friend to her role. She mentions Putin. Whilst the measures that she's announcing today are incredibly welcome for my constituents and all our constituents to protect, and particularly the poorest and most vulnerable in society, will she give an assurance today that her government will continue to stand firm against the appalling and brutal actions of Putin and his thuggish regime? And will she tell the British people honestly that we are in for a difficult winter, notwithstanding the challenges that it faces?
Well, Well, my honourable friend is right. The reason we are in this difficult situation is because of Putin's appalling war in Ukraine. But we do need to make sure that our energy supplies are more resilient and more secure, so we are never in this situation again, and we cannot be subject to global energy prices and the actions of dictators.
You would be if we listened to you.
We are delivering a stable environment that gives investors the confidence to back gas as part of our transition to net zero. It is vital that we take steps to increase our domestic energy supply. I'll make a bit more progress and then I will give way. We will end the moratorium on extracting our huge reserves of shale, which could get gas flowing as soon as 6 months, where there is local support for it. We will launch Great British Nuclear later this month, putting us on a path to deliver up to a quarter of our electricity generation with nuclear by 2050. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
To the Prime Minister. Last September, I asked the then Business Secretary why the government signed off on the closure of the Rough gas storage facility. He dismissed it as not relevant and he accused me of stoking panic and alarm. Given the government are now reportedly reopening that facility, it doesn't suggest the new Chancellor is a man of foresight and strategy, does it, Prime Minister?
We are in a very, very difficult situation, and I am committed, as Prime Minister, to doing everything it takes to resolve this situation, to help people with their energy bills, and to make sure we have security of supply for the long term. I've already taken a lot of interventions. I need to make progress on this speech. As a result of these steps on shale and on nuclear, and the acceleration of renewables, I am today setting a new ambition for our country. Far from being dependent on the global energy market and the actions of malign actors, we will make sure that the UK is a net energy exporter by 2040. And my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, will set out a plan in the next 2 months to make sure we achieve this. Mr. Speaker, I know that businesses and families are very concerned about how they will get through this winter. That is why I felt it was important to act urgently to provide immediate help and support, as well as setting out our plan about how we are going to secure the UK's future energy supplies. This is part of my vision for rebuilding our economy. Secure energy supply is vital to growth and prosperity, yet it has been ignored for too long. I will end the UK's short-termist approach to energy security and supply once and for all. That is what I promised on the steps of Downing Street. Today, we are acting decisively on that pledge. This will help us build a stronger, more resilient and more secure United Kingdom. I commend this motion to the House.
There's a lot of members who wish to get in, so think of others after we've got through the front benches. I now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of our opening speech. We're in the middle of a national emergency. People are really scared, and families don't know if they can warm their homes this winter, and businesses ask if they can keep the lights on. That is why the Labour Party spent the summer fighting for a price freeze, so that no household would pay a penny more on their bills. When we called for it, many people said we were wrong. They pretended that this crisis was something that just affected the poorest, as if working families on average wages could easily shoulder astronomical bills. They dismissed our call for support as handouts. But those objections could never last. The Prime Minister had no choice. No government can stand by while millions of families fall into poverty, whilst businesses shut their doors and the economy falls to ruin. So I am pleased there is action today, and that the principle and that the principle of a price limit has been accepted. But under our plan, not a penny more on bills. Under this plan, a price rise. But this support... I'll just make some progress and then I will. But this support does not come cheap. And the real question before the House today, the real question the government faces, the political question, is who is going to pay? The Treasury estimates that energy producers could make £170 billion in unexpected windfall profits over the next 2 years. I repeat that, £170 billion in unexpected windfall profits over the next 2 years. I will give way in just a moment. The head of BP has called this crisis a cash machine for his company. And households are on the other end of that cash machine, their bills funding these eye-watering profits. That's why we've been calling for a windfall tax since January. And it's why we want to see the windfall tax expanded now. But the Prime Minister is opposed to windfall taxes. She wants to leave these vast profits on the table with one clear and obvious consequence: the bill will be picked up by working people. She claims that a windfall tax will deter investment. That's ridiculous. These vast profits are not the reward of careful planning. They are the unexpected windfall from Putin's barbarity in Ukraine. There is no reason why taxing them would affect investment in the future. Don't just take my word for it. Asked which investment BP would cancel if there was a windfall tax, the chief executive said none. None. His words, not mine. So the Prime Minister's only argument against the windfall tax falls apart at first inspection, laying bare that she's simply driven by dogma, and it's working people that will pay for that dogma. I will give way.
Does he accept that this government has already introduced a windfall tax, and energy companies today are paying 65% on their profits? What would he rather see that tax set at?
We're happy to 100%. He wants 100%.
We're talking about what happens this winter and next. And if he doesn't understand, I'll tell him so. Every pound the Prime Minister's government refuses to raise in windfall taxes, which is leaving billions on the table, is an extra pound of borrowing. That's the simple, straightforward argument. Every pound she leaves on the table is an extra pound of borrowing, loading the burden of the cost of living crisis onto working people who will have to pay back for years to come.
Will my right honourable friend?
I will.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. The Prime Minister has been careful to frame her guarantee in terms of her refusal to tax. But is she not going to have a problem explaining to the British people how a levy on their bills in the future to repay the borrowing is not actually a tax?
Yes. I'm grateful for that intervention. This is the basic political divide. They want to protect the excess profits of the oil and gas and energy, the excess profits. We want to protect working people. Mr. Speaker, I will give way.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way, and this Saturday myself and many members of the Chesterfield Labour Party will be out meeting voters in Chesterfield, and if any of them haven't been paying attention this week, they might still say you're all the same. But isn't it absolutely clear now that there is a clear divide? Yes. Every voter that I knock on the door, they will know political parties have a choice. They've chosen to be on the side of the energy generators. We've chosen to be on the side of bill payers.
Well, I'm grateful for that, and I'll be absolutely amazed if members opposite haven't picked this up. Ask voters whether they think that it's fair that they pick up the bill or those companies that made profits they didn't expect to make? And there's only one answer to that question. It's a very simple question of whose side are you on? And I'm afraid this isn't a one-off, because not only is the Prime Minister refusing to extend the windfall tax, she is also choosing to cut corporation tax. An extra £17 billion in tax cuts for companies that are already doing well. That means handing a tax cut to the water companies polluting our beaches, handing tax cuts to the banks, handing a tax cut to Amazon. She's making that choice, even though households and public services need every penny they can get. Working people are paying for the cost of living crisis. Stroke victims wait an hour for an ambulance, and criminals walk the streets with impunity. It's the wrong choice for working people. It's the wrong choice for Britain. I will give way.
I thank my right honourable friend, and it seems that the government has decided to deal with this energy crisis off the backs of ordinary, hard-working Brits and load huge levels of debt on future generations rather than properly taxing the billions of pounds of excess profits for energy companies. Why is this government on the side of big corporates rather than being on the side of ordinary, hard-working Brits? Is it because the Prime Minister is a former employee of Shell and is therefore on the side of oil and gas companies and is not protecting ordinary working British people?
Well, I'm grateful for that intervention, and it does come down to this basic point. Everybody in this House recognises that profits are needed for investment in all businesses. But in this case, these are unexpected profits that were not expected to make. And when the chief executive of BP says this will not deter any investment, it's a bit rich for the opposite to say he's completely wrong. He is the chief executive of BP. He's made his case. It's the complete opposite of the case that the Prime Minister is trying to make. Now, Mr. Speaker, the immediate cause of, I will in a moment, the immediate cause of this energy crisis is Putin's grotesque invasion of Ukraine. We stand united in our support for Ukraine. If we're to defend democracy, defeat imperialism, and preserve security on the continent, Putin's aggression must fail. And whatever our political differences, the Prime Minister will always have my full support in that common endeavour. But we must ask ourselves, why are we so exposed to changes in the international price of oil and gas? Why are we so at the mercy of dictators, able to pull the plug on wells and shut down pipelines? Why is there such a fundamental flaw in our national security? I will give way in just a moment. I'll make my argument, then I will give way. It's about a failure to prepare, a failure to increase our energy independence, a failure to rapidly decrease our reliance on fossil fuels. They banned, Mr. Speaker, they banned onshore wind in 2015. That cost us clean energy capacity equivalent to all our Russian gas imports in recent years. A policy disaster. The Prime Minister has been constantly opposed to solar power, the cheapest form of energy that we have. And she's been consistently wrong. And it's not just what the Prime Minister said in the heat of her leadership campaign this summer. When she was Environment Secretary, the government slashed solar subsidies. The market crashed. I will give way.
To the right honourable gentleman. But the Leader of the Opposition is being completely misleading, if I may say so, because what he said, it's under this government that the United Kingdom has the second highest offshore wind generation capacity anywhere in the world. And how is that created? It's through investment by companies. This government will allow for that to happen.
Well, I take it from that intervention that he doesn't quarrel with me that the ban on onshore wind since 2015 has been a policy disaster, along with the opposition to solar power. Forgive me, I saw the former Prime Minister raising it. I will take her intervention, of course.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman for giving way. He's talking about lack of preparation for energy security for the United Kingdom. In that case, if Labour is so worried about lack of preparation, why did they not build any new nuclear capacity?
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for that intervention. Let me deal with it in full, because it's a very important point, because nuclear is vital to our future, and a new generation of power plants should have been built by now. Yesterday, the Prime Minister tried desperately to blame Labour, and that intervention goes to this point. I remember the exchange across this dispatch box in 2006, in which Prime Minister Blair said, "I'm pro-nuclear." And the leader of the opposition, David Cameron, didn't know where to look. If you haven't seen the clip, have a look. I'm pro-nuclear. David Cameron didn't know where to look. The uncomfortable truth for members opposite is this. The last Labour government gave the go-ahead for new nuclear sites in 2009. In the 13 long years since then, not one has been completed. Let me turn to home insulation, which I will give way.
To the right honourable gentleman. Tony Blair may have said he was pro-nuclear, but he didn't actually build any nuclear power stations. Let me ask him about the windfall tax. The £170 billion he talks about, from my understanding, most of that is not profits of UK companies. It's energy supplied to the United Kingdom, but it's not within our ability to tax it. And secondly, we already have a windfall tax. We're already taxing those profits at 65%. How high does he want a windfall tax to go?
On the question of 2006, I think I'll give way to him again. What was his party's position in 2006 when David Cameron was asked the question on nuclear? Because he didn't have a position on it. But on the £170 billion that he raises, I think he's wrong about that. But if there is any doubt, I'd invite the Treasury to disclose the documents about this so that we can all see them and evaluate them. Because I think I'm right and I think he's wrong. But if the documents could be made available, we can all look at that £170 billion. Mr. Speaker, I will give way.
But isn't the bigger point that there's a simple choice about how you pay for it? It either all goes on borrowing and ordinary families and on the never-never for this country, or at least some of it is charged in a windfall tax on unearned and unexpected income, which Putin has basically put into the pockets of Shell and BP. That's the fundamental choice, isn't it?
That is the fundamental choice. It's the fundamental divide in this House. Let them defend their position to protect those excess profits, and we will defend our position of standing up for working people. I'm going to make some progress. Mr. Speaker, I've taken a lot of intervention. I'm going to make some progress. Let me turn to home insulation, which reduces energy consumption like nothing else. We have the draftiest homes in Europe. The last Labour government set about fixing that. Then the party opposite said, cut the green crap, and the whole project all but collapsed. Installation rates down by 92%. Utterly short-sighted, and it's costing millions of households £1,000 a year on their energy bills right now. The Prime Minister is right to recognise that immediate support needs to be combined with longer-term action. But I'm afraid fracking and a dash for gas in the North Sea will not cut bills, nor strengthen our energy security, but they will drive a coach and horses through our efforts to fight the looming climate crisis. She should listen to her own Chancellor sitting next to her. What did the Chancellor have to say about this just a few months ago? Now, this is quite a long quote. See the Chancellor leaning forward. I've tried to cut it down. But every sentence is worth repeating of what the Chancellor said just a few months ago, his words. For those calling for its return, they misunderstand the situation we find ourselves in. If we lifted the fracking moratorium, it would take up to a decade to extract sufficient volumes. And it would come at a high price for communities and our precious countryside. His words. I'll go on because this is so good. Second, he said just a few months ago, no amount of shale gas from hundreds of wells dotted across rural England would be enough to lower the European price anytime soon. And he went on. And with the best will in the world, private companies are not going to sell shale gas they produce to UK consumers below the market price. They are not charities. Spot on, Chancellor. And what did the Chancellor at the same time have to say about North Sea gas? Additional North Sea production won't materially affect the wholesale price. Indeed, earlier this year, his previous department helpfully put out a series of Mythbusters, a government myth-busting document. Here's one of them. Chancellor, your document. Myth. Extracting more North Sea gas lowers prices. Answer. Fact. UK production isn't large enough to materially impact on the global price of gas. I've got a copy for the Prime Minister. We do need to carefully manage our existing resources in the North Sea. And the industry has an important role to play in our future as we transition to a different form of energy. But doubling down on fossil fuels is a ludicrous answer to a fossil fuel crisis. And if all countries took the approach advocated by her new Energy Secretary of squeezing every single drop out of their fossil fuel reserves, global temperatures will rise by a catastrophic 3 degrees. That will be devastating for our planet and future generations. And it's totally unnecessary. Now, I'm going to make some progress because I do think other speakers need to get in. New wind and solar power are now 9 times cheaper than gas. 9 times cheaper. So we need a clean energy sprint, urgently accelerating the rollout of offshore wind, onshore wind, solar, nuclear, hydrogen and tidal. And last year, I set out a new national mission to insulate 19 million homes and cut bills for good. If the government had taken me up on that challenge, 2 million homes would already be insulated this winter. Britain needs a fresh start. We need a government that will never leave working people to pick up the tab for excess profits of the energy industry. We need a government that plans for the long term, rather than leaving us badly exposed to the whims of dictators. And we need a government that will drive us forward to energy independence, rather than doubling down on fossil fuels. The change we need is not the 4th Tory Prime Minister in 6 years, it's a Labour government. Thank you.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I refer the House to my entry in the Members' Register. Can I first of all congratulate my right honourable friend on acting so swiftly to bring forward a package of support for people with their energy bills. There's no doubt, as every member of this House knows, that this is a matter of real concern for people in my constituency and every other constituency who've been concerned about how they're going to heat their homes, and indeed businesses worried about how they can continue to run their businesses. May I also welcome the fact that my right honourable friend has coupled action on energy bills with action on energy security. The vicious further invasion of Ukraine by Russia has indeed shown the necessity of us having our own energy security, although it makes sense anyway. We have made important progress in this over recent years. I refer, of course, to the investment in Hinkley Point C, and I again welcome the commitment that my right honourable friend and the government have made to continuing that commitment to support nuclear energy. And as I pointed out in my intervention, just wait a second. Well, perhaps more than 1 second, but anyway. As I pointed out in my intervention to the Right Honourable Leader of the Opposition, and was emphasised by the excellent intervention by my Right Honourable friend, the Member for Forest of Dean, in 13 years of government, whatever the then Leader of the Labour Party might have said, they did not build any new nuclear capability. I will give way to
I thank her for giving way. On Hinkley Point C, it's going to be at least 4 years late, possibly 5 years late. It's nearly 50% over budget. and EDF have got an eye-watering 35-year contract for a strike rate at £92.50 per megawatt, compared to roughly £40 per megawatt for just 15 years in onshore and offshore wind. She should have scrapped Hinkley Point C when she had the chance, shouldn't she?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that it's high time that Scottish nationalists actually came up with some practical solutions to these issues, rather than rejecting everything that the government suggests. I give forward.
I'm very grateful to the former Prime Minister. You know, we're all trying to find energy security. Can I say to her and say to the government front bench, what we should be doing is prioritising tidal. There's an excellent Royal Society report from last year that indicates we can get to 11.5 gigawatts. I'm asking the government to enhance the ring-fence pot from 20 to 50 million. You'll get the base load you need, and you won't need nuclear energy.
Say to the right honourable gentleman, this is actually a rather strange point in my political career, because I actually agree with him about the importance of tidal. And can I also say to him that when I was Prime Minister, I looked very closely, over a significant period of time, at proposals, particularly for the Severn Estuary, and unfortunately, at that time, the price that would have had to have been guaranteed in relation to the cost to the consumer was too high. Of course, looking at it today, it could be a very different picture. Now, my right honourable friend outlined a number of steps that the government is taking, and I look forward to seeing the full details of these. But I would like to suggest there are some other measures which will address energy prices and energy security, while capitalising on our high-growth tech sectors, and would also help us to meet our domestic and international climate change obligations. Because there are measures that will save people money that will also help to save the planet. The UK has already shown that you don't have to choose between low emissions and economic growth. You can have both. To achieve net zero, we will need to remove the country's dependence on fossil fuels. My right honourable friend announced a net zero review. Perhaps when he sums up this debate, the Secretary of State could indicate how that net zero review will fit in with the net zero strategy which the government published in advance of COP26 and which many are already working on. So while my right honourable friend has acted swiftly and correctly to help people over these difficult times, it does make sense to accelerate our transition to a low-carbon energy system. And that can be done by, in just a moment, that can be done by speeding up the rollout of low-cost, homegrown, renewable technologies.
Former Prime Minister, she said the government's acted correctly, but the government's case is that energy prices are going up because of the war in Ukraine. Therefore, these profits are being earned because of the war in Ukraine. Why is it right to prioritise war profiteering and instead have a stealth tax on households?
What is right is to provide support for households who are worried about their energy bills. That's exactly what the government is doing. Of course, if we are going to increase our use of renewables, and it is important that the price that people are paying for their electricity reflects the cost of that production and not the cost of gas. And I welcome again the fact that my right honourable friend, no, I'm going to make some progress. I'm going to make some progress on it. Can I say to my right honourable friend that I'm pleased that she's actually indicated that she's going to take action in relation to that particular matter. Can I also say that getting full benefit from this does mean upgrading the UK's power grid infrastructure. Alongside this, we do need to improve the energy efficiency of homes. And this would not just reduce demand for energy, saving people money, but again, it's an element that will help to save the planet. We do need to consider rolling out a significant home insulation programme. There is also, I will give way to my right honourable friend and then I'll give way to them.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend. Her government did indeed look very closely at the prospect of a tidal lagoon off Swansea Bay. And at that time, it is quite correct, as she says, that it was too expensive, although the price now looks relatively attractive. But does she agree with me that actually the real opportunity at the moment, which the current Chancellor has been very supportive of when he was at Bayes, is for marine energy to come from tidal stream, which the new renewable auction is supporting, but there is much more that can be done, especially if we can affect the planning regulations around the pipeline of opportunity. Does she agree that there is more this government could do on that?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and I welcome every opportunity to actually increase the diversity of our supply of energy, and looking at these new opportunities is absolutely a way to do that as well. I said I would give way to the right honourable gentleman.
Very grateful, and of course I completely support the tidal lagoon in Swansea, and I hope that that is now a real possibility for us. I hope the Prime Minister would accept that. But I just want to, and I agree with her about insulation. I think I understood the Prime Minister to say earlier that there was going to be protection for public services for just 6 months. Many local authorities, hospitals, schools are facing dramatically increased bills already. Aren't they going to need more support than just 6 months?
Say that I think the public sector will be very pleased to hear that the government has taken their concerns on board and is providing support for them. Can I also say, as another step that I think the government needs to take, it should look at regulations, building regulations. We are still building homes with gas boilers. Doesn't it make sense to actually change the regulations? Because those homes will have to be retrofitted in just a very few years' time. And surely it is more cost effective to take action now.
On that very point, which you give way
I'm very... Before, the Honourable Gentleman had one intervention. What I'm bothered about is a lot of people want to get it. I don't want to stifle the debate, but I want to make sure everybody gets a voice.
Yes, I apologise, Mr. Speaker, for being generous in interventions. The government, for instance, by we've already heard about some early-stage technologies and emerging sectors such as hydrogen production. Greater investor certainty cuts the cost of new technology, drives innovation, creates jobs and boosts economic growth. And the government's unequivocal support for this agenda would be a positive signal not just for our green tech industry, but for the ambition of the UK economy more broadly. Now, no, I'm just about to finish, so. People need help with their bills today. That is what the government is providing. But Britain led the world through the Industrial Revolution. If we grasp the opportunity now, we can lead the world in a cleaner, greener form of growth.
Hear, hear. We now come to the Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say it's a pleasure to follow the former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead. And if I can just reflect back very briefly on the way that she behaved when she was Prime Minister, and I have to say the courtesy that she showed to opposition leaders, whether it was the then leader of the Labour Party or ourselves as a third party. And if I can gently say to the Prime Minister that some of the protocols of making sure that we had advance sight of statements is important, and indeed that we're aware of when the Prime Minister would be coming to the Chamber to speak. I don't know if she's listening to any of that, but it would be helpful if that could be passed on. Mr. Speaker, at the start of the year, we were faced with an energy crisis. By the summer, it was an emergency. Right now, today, we're at the precipice of a humanitarian disaster. Because it's no longer a question of whether to heat or eat, when many households can no longer afford to do either.
Would the honourable gentleman give
let me make some progress on it, and I will. This cost crisis puts livelihoods and lives at risk. And all the while, as this disaster deepened, all summer, the Tories spent all their time desperately fighting amongst themselves, and the public were left desperately waiting for a real cost of living plan. We finally have a plan today, but I fear that when the public absorb the details, it will fall far short of what help they need. Now, we've heard today that the green levies are being scrapped, and that is something that is of deep concern to those of us on these benches, particularly given that the green levies fund the warm discount scheme and, of course, energy efficiency measures for low-income households. And I want to ask the government to make sure that that support will remain in place for those that need it. But, Mr. Speaker, the sheer scale of those soaring energy bills meant that there was never any question that households and businesses couldn't be able to pay the cost of energy bills. They were and they are unaffordable. If these prices weren't frozen, the bills simply couldn't have been paid. So, freezing prices wasn't really a choice. It's the only political option. And when the current price cap stands at £2,000 with a 54% increase since spring, and many people are already unable to pay, setting the cap at £2,500 isn't an actual freeze. We know too that businesses, especially SMEs, are facing even sharper cost increases than households and an avalanche of insolvencies and redundancies is forecast. Many businesses simply could not have afforded to stay open. I will give way.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way. Reed's Bakery in my constituency, which supplies biscuits to the four corners of the world, is in danger of going bust by Christmas. So can I appeal to the government, in a spirit of inclusivity, to please look at the letter I've been sent by Reed's Bakery and to see what could be tailored to help a vital business in a remote part of the UK.
I agree with my honourable friend, my neighbouring MP, and indeed over the course of the last few weeks I've visited businesses in Ayrshire with my honourable friend, the member for Kilmarnock, and visited another bakery, Brownings, and in fact met with the industry body. And it's clear that bakers in particular are facing real struggles with the rise of energy and other costs. And it's critical that the government gives the details of what they're intending to support business. I'll take one more intervention, then I'll...
Grateful to the right honourable gentleman. On the question of the CAP, the Prime Minister indicated that one of our reviews is going to be on regulation. Does the right honourable gentleman think it's time to take a serious look at the operations of Ofgem and, for a regulator, how much support they're giving to consumers, whether it's domestic consumers or businesses?
I think it's fair to say that the current regime is not fit for purpose, and it's why we're in the situation that we are today. So an urgent review of that is absolutely required. Mr. Speaker, let me make some progress. Good businesses, profitable businesses, seeing a tsunami of cost increases with energy costs at the core of these, quite simply are facing a fight for survival. It is clear that today's plan does not go nearly far enough to mitigate the expected cost increase facing employers, and the UK Government needs to grasp the scale of this emergency.
I wish to say something about the announcement which has just been made about Her Majesty. I know I speak on behalf of the entire House when I say that we send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen, and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers at this moment. I'm going to take no more, just to, if there is anything else, we will update the House accordingly. Thank you. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure on behalf of all colleagues that we're saddened to hear the announcement that's been made, and the thoughts and prayers of all of us will be with Her Majesty the Queen and indeed with the royal family. Mr. Speaker, in reality, the one big political question, the real question, was how today's plan would be paid for and who would pay for it. And ever since the new Prime Minister took office, we've been waiting for these answers. But after all the waiting, it couldn't be any clearer. She set it out very brazenly. The Prime Minister's plan means that the public pays. She has made the political choice to tax families instead of companies, to put profit over people. Instead of a windfall tax, she's chosen a new Tory tax. The Truss tax. The Truss tax that means that in the months and years ahead, households and businesses will be punished with higher bills, higher interest rates and higher mortgage costs. A Truss tax means it cuts to the vital public services people rely on and which are used to support the most vulnerable. A Truss tax means a threat to the Scottish budget, which the Scottish Government is using to protect our population and shield workers and public services as best they can.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will give way. I will give way.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. He seems to be making an argument for a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies. And given that the Leader of the Opposition wasn't able to answer this question, they already pay 65% on their profits. What would he rather see that tax set at?
I'm grateful for that intervention, and if he just bears with me, I'm going to come to that very specific point. But that issue of who pays is important, because there is no... Well, actually, I will do, and you might actually show some respect if you don't mind. Because at the end of the day, oil and gas producers are making windfall profits. Our constituents, his constituents, are suffering. And it's right, Mr. Speaker, that we look at the contribution that those making windfall profits will make, and I will come to that. I'm going to make a little bit of progress because I'm conscious that others want to get in. Mr Speaker, the frightening bit for people is that the new Prime Minister made this choice on day one in the job.
Yep.
Because on day one, we saw the pound slip to a low not seen since the Thatcher years, knocked by the UK's worsening economic outlook. On day one, our first major decision as Prime Minister will see big business profits prioritised over family budgets. And on day one, we can already predict that the Truss tax paid for by households for the years to come will be the Prime Minister's enduring legacy, eating away at household budgets long after she and her party have been voted out of office. If day one was that bad, you couldn't blame people for feeling that the worst is yet to come. Mr Speaker, the decision not to bring in an additional windfall tax is the biggest and the worst political choice in this plan. Because let's look at Shell and BP as an example. Now, I want corporates to be able to be profitable to invest, to create jobs and to finance a green transition. But there is a difference between a fair profit and an excess windfall or excess profit. Mr Speaker, Shell's first half profits were up by 177% to $25.2 billion. Shell were making excess profits to such an extent they brought back shares worth $8.5 billion and declared that they would buy back a further $6 billion worth of shares between July and September. If you want the example of where the excess profit is, Mr Speaker, then there it is. Yep. In total, this means that $14.5 billion of excess profits not being invested in green energy projects, money that's been generated from high energy prices, that our constituents and our businesses have to pay. That is the reality.
Indeed.
Then let's take a look at British Petroleum. Quarter two profits up from $3.1 billion to $9.2, and a share buyback for this quarter of $3.5 billion.
Yep.
You know, Mr Speaker, quite frankly, that will disgust our constituents, that money has been given back to shareholders at a time that people quite simply can't afford to put their heating on.
Here.
These are global corporates, but we can and should fairly tax their UK activities. So why on earth is the Prime Minister failing to bring in a fair windfall tax? Why are ordinary people right across these islands ultimately going to have to foot these bills? Why does her plan not address that real issue? Mr Speaker, this energy plan is not only defined by the choice it makes to make the public pay instead of the excess profits of massive corporations. It is also defined by its glaring omissions, because there is no proper plan to help those that are already struggling. Support needs to be targeted to low-income households and those negatively impacted by spiralling costs, such as unpaid carers, larger households and disabled people. In Scotland, we are already prioritising this support to the most vulnerable. The Scottish Government is doing what it can, freezing rents, banning evictions, freezing train fares, expanding free school meals to primary 6 and primary 7. That's a government acting with compassion.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for making the most valid point, that the working people across these islands will be paying for generations to come for this borrowing, for excess greed, described by the UN Secretary-General as utterly grotesque and immoral, to be making excess profits on the back of fossil fuels. And what I've heard from this government today is more of the same. The question I want to ask is, has the government put any conditions, despite their ideology that profits must be made regardless, have they put any conditions on these excess profits on what they're going to do in investment to a rapid transition so it saves all our future generations from the climate catastrophe?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. And, you know, in the context of this, we're doing what we can with the devolved powers that we have. And let me say to the government that one of the things that we have done is introduce the game-changing Scottish child payment, which will be increased to £25 a week, lifting 50,000 children in poverty out of poverty in Scotland. But I need to make progress. But we're all too aware that this is nowhere near enough to mitigate the effects of this crisis, because most of the key economic levers lie here at Westminster. So, if the new Prime Minister is serious about helping everyone through this winter, she should at the very least lift universal credit by £25 a week.
We'll take it away.
Whilst I welcome the remarks of the Prime Minister on those on off-grid, we must be given clarity over support for those across swathes of rural Scotland who are reliant on oil heating and who are not subject to the price cap. Clarity is also needed to those who have accepted fixed-term contracts at a higher rate in a bid to weather the storm. They must be allowed to switch to benefit from the support that's been put in place. And crucially, vital support for the most vulnerable must go hand in hand with the UK Government to increase budgets of the devolved administrations or grant them greater powers to borrow so that they can do more to help all public service workers and the most vulnerable. I will give way.
I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman who's making a very broad and apposite speech. He was challenged on the rate of tax that he believed was appropriate, but of course he will also know that prior to the introduction of the windfall tax, the UK had the lowest tax rate of any oil and gas producer in the world. 65%, which is what he was challenged on, is actually 6 percentage points below the average of all producers in the world. So even if you were prepared to go to the global average, it would still mean that relief could be given to taxpayers in this country.
I have to say that the honourable gentleman makes an awful lot of sense with his intervention, and what we should be reflecting on is that these are oil and gas companies that are making additional profits, not because they're improving their businesses, not because they're investing, but quite simply because the oil and gas prices are higher. And it's quite right in the context of that our consumers, our businesses are compensated. Why on earth are we sitting back allowing the oil and gas companies to engage in billions and billions of dollars of share buybacks? Mr. Speaker, I want to make progress because I'm conscious of the time and those that want to speak. I want to briefly deal with another prominent point in the Prime Minister's speech, because the Prime Minister blames the cost of living crisis on the war in Ukraine, and I believe that this issue is worth expanding on. And of course, there is no doubting that what has happened in Ukraine has had a major role in spiralling wholesale prices. And we have rightly come together across this chamber in condemnation of Putin's horrific war and his actions to thwart European energy supply. And I look forward to continuing to work with the new government in a spirit of consensus on this issue. We all stand together against Putin's horrible actions, the war in Ukraine. But as we've rightly helped Ukraine, we must also help citizens at home. Indeed, we owe it to them to do so. And I would hope that the Prime Minister will reach consensus with me on this point. But where we divide is what I believe we must recognise that other countries in Europe, far more reliant on Russian gas than the UK, have weathered the economic storm far better than the United Kingdom. And we must therefore recognise the UK government's role in creating the circumstances for this crisis.
We'll take it away.
Shameful mismanagement by a successive Tory government stalked by a Tory Brexit means that the UK has the highest inflation in the G7, the lowest growth in the G20, and we're marching headlong into a recession. UK household electricity prices have surged ahead of European peers, and the UK is now in a deeper state of crisis than most because of the damaging choices that have been made.
We don't need it.
Scotland doesn't need it.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Does he share my view that for my constituents in North Ayrshire and Arran, the most important aspect of this announcement today is that as they were waiting to hear of help with their fuel bills as they live in difficulty, what they've been told today is that their fuel bills will rise and they will be bitterly disappointed by this, and nothing has been offered to them today. Does he agree with that disappointment?
Yes, I do. And of course we need to reflect that these energy bills in Scotland are rising in an energy-rich Scotland. And the damage of the choices that the UK government has made Choices that have been imposed upon us make the choice of Scotland's future ever clearer.
Would he give way?
Because Scotland is energy rich, we simply shouldn't be facing an emergency. Mr Deputy Speaker, it may surprise some in this House, but Scotland produces 6 times more gas than we consume, and almost 100% of our entire electricity production comes from renewables. That's not attention-seeking, Prime Minister. These are the facts. Scotland has the energy. We just simply don't have the powers. We are stuck in a UK market that prices our electricity based on the price of wholesale gas, and the power to change the system lies with Westminster.
I thank him for giving way. And of course he'll also know that although we are producing almost 100% of our energy from renewable sources, the grid connection charges that are £7.36 per megawatt hour compared to 40 pence per megawatt hour in England doesn't help further investment. Incredible. We need these grid connection charges to be reduced, because my constituents want to know, when they can see windmill or wind turbines outside their windows, why are their prices going up?
Well, again, my honourable friend makes a very, very important point. We're being ripped off on Scotland's ability to deliver green renewable energy. But it's even worse than that, because for those of us that live in the north of Scotland, because we have a regional distribution market, we pay a premium for the electricity that was sent south. We then have to pay the highest prices to get it back. That's the cost to people in Scotland of Westminster's control of our energy market. So what is needed, most crucial of all, and what is glaringly lacking in this energy plan, is fundamental overhaul of the energy market to break the link between cost of gas and the price of renewable and low-carbon electricity. The reality, Mr Deputy Speaker, is that an independent and an energy-rich Scotland, with the normal powers to act on our own interests, could have cushioned our economy from this cost-of-living crisis. Through independence, Scotland could use our energy well for the benefit of our people. So for households and businesses in Scotland, the cost of living crisis is literally the cost of living with Westminster. It is a cost we can no longer afford, and it is a price we are no longer willing to pay. It's why Scotland's people will choose independence.
There's a lot of interest in this debate, so therefore we're introducing forthwith a 3-minute time limit. Robin Walker.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the Prime Minister and indeed all her colleagues to their places on the front bench and the rapid action that has been announced today. I wanted to see action for consumers in my constituency, but also for businesses, for charities and the public sector, and I'm delighted to hear all of that included in today's statement. Over the summer, I've heard from hundreds of constituents about their concerns, people who are vulnerable, elderly, students and people with illnesses and disabilities, which mean that they weren't able to turn down their heating in the upcoming winter. So the action which has been announced today will be extremely welcome in all of those quarters. The fact that there is a 2-year cap in place, particularly welcome in my constituency. But I've also been hearing from businesses, and I've been very, very concerned at some of the costs facing pubs, hospitality businesses, manufacturers in my constituency. Indeed, as long ago as last year, I was writing to the then Business Secretary, now Chancellor, about high-energy manufacturers such as aluminium extrusions businesses, Superform and Aeromet in my constituency, and about some of our largest manufacturers, Worcester Bosch and Mazak, and the impact of energy costs on them. So I'm delighted that today's announcement also means help for businesses with energy, and of course that help for businesses with energy is also, in the long term, help for consumers. I look forward to hearing more about the urgent work going on to support the hospitality sector, which is so important in all of our constituencies. And even retailers have been affected by these issues. I was hearing from a wonderful independent retailer in Worcester, Toys and Games of Worcester, that their energy bills were going up by as much as 400% they expected later on this year. I hope that this intervention today will mean that that no longer happens and that business can continue to thrive. I'm delighted as a former schools minister to hear of the help for schools. I know some of the challenges that they face with energy pressures, and I think it's vital that we help them to address those. I do think the intervention on that front is vital and important, and of course for charities as well. In the last week I visited my wonderful hospice in Worcester St Richards, and this week I'll be visiting the Children's Hospice. I know both of them were concerned about the impact of energy bills, so we've seen correct interventions in all of those spaces. There's much to welcome in this statement. The new Energy Supply Task Force, the speeding up of deployment of clean technologies, including, crucially, hydrogen, the reduction in inflation by up to 5 percentage points, and the new Bank of England scheme to support liquidity in the wholesale market. A review to ensure net zero can be met in a way that supports business and is pro-growth, which I'm delighted to hear is taking place under my honourable friend and sometime lookalike for Kingswood. So I welcome this statement. I want to make sure that we go further, and particularly I would urge ministers to consider the opportunities of hydrogen in helping us to make sure we can continue to deliver gas central heating to our constituents' home in a clean, low-cost and energy-efficient way.
Play of effort. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Although the solutions to this crisis may sound complicated in this debate, the choice is straightforward for the government. Who pays at the end of the day? And let's be clear what a windfall tax is. It's not taxing the profits of energy companies that they had planned for and that could be expected in all reason. This is a windfall that has come about, as the government has said itself, as a consequence of what is happening in the Ukraine, the aggression by Putin. And the question that I have and that my constituents will have is, how can the government reasonably come to a conclusion that it is okay for those energy companies to make these huge profits on the back of that aggression by Putin? And this is not as if it's a windfall for the government. This is going to cost the taxpayer through the government, no matter what we do over the windfall tax. And the government is under pressure in other areas of expenditure. We only have to look at the newspapers today about yet again, the numbers of people waiting for operations in the NHS has gone up again to 6.8 million people waiting. We can see in the papers today about the teachers' assistants in schools, where they are being forced, because of the cost of living, to question whether they can stay committed to supporting children in the schools and move to higher paid jobs in places like supermarkets. Everything, where you look, the government is under pressure of a public expenditure on our vital public services. Yet when it comes to this, they're prepared to just wave aside the potential to pay for these increases. I'll give way briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful that he mentions the case of teaching assistants, because I actually had a teaching assistant contact me recently, and there are many, many low-paid workers and many others on moderate incomes who will be staggered by the government's decision today to put the interests of energy companies ahead of normal families.
Absolutely. My honourable friend is absolutely right. And so the government is morally wrong to turn its back on this windfall tax when it clearly is under financial pressure in other areas of public expenditure. But I wanted to raise just one specific issue relating to my constituency, and this brief contribution I can make to this debate. And I have a craft bakery that has survived for 100 years. It's about to celebrate its centenary. It's been run by 6 generations of the same family. It kept feeding people in my constituency. I wasn't the MP at the time, but during the Second World War. So even the Luftwaffe couldn't shut down this bakery. It employs 20 members of staff, and now it's trying to renegotiate in an industry that is really heavy in the use of energy. It is trying to renegotiate its energy contracts, and it is facing increases in those contracts of 300–400%, and it's negotiated them now. And in the statement that we've had published, and that's it, by the way, that's the sheer length of this statement in this important crisis. That's the amount of the government's statement today. 200 words. They are facing negotiations now, but this statement says that there will be assistance equivalent to that given to individuals for businesses guaranteed for 6 months. And the Prime Minister, I wrote the words down, said that businesses would be given some idea of what assistance they will get in 3 months. Well, they're negotiating now. I mean, we got no clarity from the Prime Minister in her statement. It was like she was making a Queen's speech, my government will. But she gave us no detail on actually what these government ministers will be doing. And one of the things I want to guarantee on is if we're going to get a financial statement from the government next week or towards the end of this session before we break again for conferences, will there be a proper debate in here on that financial statement as we're required to have? Or will the government avoid scrutiny yet again? Because that's been a repeated action.
Mel Stride.
Deputy Speaker, and I rise to broadly welcome these measures. We know that we live in terribly difficult times. Yesterday, the Treasury Committee took evidence from the Governor of the Bank of England and other members of the MPC, and the point was made that the impact of these energy rises on households is about 4 times that which occurred in the 1970s. These are truly frightening times, and so I'm very pleased that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has come forward with such a bold package of measures, both for consumers but also critically for businesses over the next 6 months with a review after 3. I was pleased to see the Bank of England facility, the liquidity facility for energy businesses totalling 40 billion, which I think would be very important in terms of the functioning of the marketplace, and also this critical commitment to review the way in which the pricing of our electricity is determined, whether it be in relation to gas or the actual underlying costs of alternative means of energy production. I did want to focus briefly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on the macroeconomic issues here, which are easy to overlook. This is a huge intervention. The Prime Minister detailed that the Chancellor would come forward with those costings at the emergency fiscal event that he is to present to the House soon. Well, that in terms including, or alongside, should I say, the tax reductions that have been mooted, plus the other pressures on the public finances, mean that debt is most certainly going to increase, as is the deficit. And whilst it has been stated that inflation will be assisted by these measures, which is true, inflation, of course, is just a measure of price rises relative to a previous period at a particular point in time. And whilst it may be the case that the downward pressure on the CPI from these freezes will be positive, it will be a stimulus to the economy, and through time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, inflation may actually net increase. Now, that will require a response from our central bank, which may see interest rates in the more medium term increasing with increased servicing costs for our debt. So I think we need to see this very much in the round, and this is where I think this debate around the windfall tax actually should be at least considered, and the Treasury Committee will be looking at that in some detail. The final point I wish to make in my remaining 30 seconds is I think it's critical that when it comes to the emergency fiscal event, we do have an OBR independent forecast to take into account all of these issues, the great uncertainty that we're talking about, the huge fiscal interventions which have yet, the costings have not been presented to us. We need to see what the impact of that is going to be on the public finances in order to reassure the markets. Thank you.
Thank you. Caroline Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Everyone will be affected by the rise in energy prices, all looking for ways to cut back by being more careful about the appliance we use or opting for alternative ways to keep warm and prepare meals. It's a worrying time for many of my constituents in Swansea East and for the others the length and breadth of the country. But for some, the worry and the fear are even greater. Over 60,000 people across the UK are in need of renal replacement therapy in the form of dialysis or a transplant, as is my daughter-in-law Hayley is one of those. Hayley suffers from kidney failure and has done since she was 11. A transplant at 15 gave her 7 years of freedom, but for the last 11 years she's been back on dialysis. Home dialysis allows Hayley to spend more time with her family and has even given her the opportunity to attend university and to go to work rather than spending 3 days a week in hospital. But running the machine for 10 days, 10 hours at a time, 6 nights a week comes at a price. The approximate cost for electricity to run the home dialysis machine is almost £80 per month at present, And with energy prices set to soar, these costs are only going to increase, threatening many patients' ability to continue their life-saving treatment at home. Charity Kidney Care UK and the Popham Kidney Support in my constituency have both recently contacted me about their concerns for patients and the lack of support they are being offered by energy providers. In which patients like Hayley are reimbursed by the Welsh Renal Clinic Network, but with the cost of extra energy needed for home dialysis machines expected to increase to £2,000 a year, the level of financial support will fall far short. And the situation is even worse in other parts of the country where reimbursement amounts vary considerably, with some patients receiving no help at all. The cost of kidney failure and other chronic conditions should not be borne by patients. And it's not only dialysis patients who are affected. Many people depend on home electrical medical equipment, oxygen concentrators, nebulizers, artificial ventilators, stair lifts, bed and bath costs. Add to this the additional cost for heating and lighting, and many vulnerable people are feeling the pain of this winter. No one should be in a position where they have to cut down use on this vital equipment for fear of paying their bills. So for my daughter-in-law and for all the Hayleys out there who are looking at uncomfortable increases and unaffordable increases, can the government ensure that sufficient financial support is made available to cover these essential electrical medical equipment? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Scope of my comments brief, given the time available. Can I just ask the Minister, in the energy update, the written statement that was published, there was confirmation, and the Prime Minister confirmed this as well, that the Chancellor will set out the expected costs as part of the fiscal statement. Can I ask if those costs will include the government's assumptions of how wholesale prices are going to move over the coming months and years? Yes, it's an estimate, but you have to make some assumptions to calculate the cost. And secondly, and importantly, will the estimates of the costs of this package be independently scored by the Office for Budget Responsibility, or will they simply be the government's assessment of costs? It would be helpful if the Minister, winding up the debate, could confirm which of those two it will be. Secondly, can I welcome wholeheartedly the confirmation from the Prime Minister that those people who are off the gas grid will be protected by this announcement. A full 40% of my constituents are off the gas grid, and I believe the number is broadly similar in the Prime Minister's own constituency. But a specific question, it's great that there's been confirmation they're going to be helped, but a bit more detail on process is important for this reason. People who buy oil and people that buy LPG tend to buy it in lumps. They have to fill a tank. And they will need to know, if they, for example, were to place an order today to make sure they have sufficient energy, they will need to know whether the costs of that order will be covered by this price guarantee, or whether it will only be for deliveries that take place after the 1st of October. So even though the details may need to be worked through, some confirmation about that I think is incredibly important. It would be terrible if someone on a low income made a very expensive purchase today and then discovered they'd inadvertently cut themselves out of help. But equally, we don't want people running out of energy by delaying those purchases. The final point is just to flesh out what I said in my intervention on the Leader of the Opposition. My understanding is the £170 billion excess profit, over half of that includes profits made by foreign companies on energy supplied to the United Kingdom. That is not within the scope of the Exchequer to be able to tax it. And secondly, we already have a windfall tax. We're already taxing excess profits at a total rate of 65%, and that windfall tax has been legislated for by this House, and it will stretch forward to December 2025. So I don't really know what the Labour Party are arguing for, and I notice in my intervention the Leader of the Opposition would not say at what rate he thought a windfall tax should raise. 65% seems quite high to me. Helpful if Labour could confirm what they believe it should be.
Senator Davey.
Mr. Speaker, following the Speaker's statement earlier, I think all our hearts and thoughts and prayers are elsewhere, but
I do want to contribute to the debate and to actually agree with the Honourable Member for the Forest of Dean on his questions on heating oil. I think that's a critical issue for many, many people in rural communities, and we do need answers, and we need them immediately. Mr Deputy Speaker, what the Prime Minister has just announced is not a freeze on people's energy bills. In the middle of a cost of living emergency, the Conservatives are choosing to put energy bills up by another £500 for struggling families. This hike in people's energy bills comes on top of the £700 rise we saw last April. Struggling families will be paying twice as much for energy as they were last year. People will still be desperately worried about how they're going to keep warm this winter. Last May's £400 discount simply won't make up for this enormous rise in energy bills. So where is the new support for families and pensioners who are struggling? Under the Prime Minister's plan, Mr Deputy Speaker, fuel poverty will get worse, not better. And turning to the way we think she's proposing to pay for this package, why does it seem the government is handing an eye-watering bill to taxpayers in the form of higher borrowing, which we all know ultimately means higher taxes for taxpayers and particularly for our children? This doesn't seem conservative, it doesn't seem right. Why has she rejected the alternative of a windfall tax on today's oil and gas giants who are raking in enormous, unexpectedly high profits thanks to President Putin's invasion of Ukraine? How is it fair, Mr Deputy Speaker, to take money from future taxpayers, from our children, and to hand it to today's oil and gas barons? How is it responsible to borrow so much to pay for consumption when our economy is already in such a mess, with the pound falling so dangerously? And on energy policy, Mr Deputy Speaker, the fair and responsible policy is to increase investment massively in the cheapest and most popular forms of energy available to us, wind and solar. I was absolutely shocked that the Prime Minister did not announce a massive expansion, a fast expansion of renewables to bring people's energy bills down. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister has made some alarming choices today, rejecting cheap wind and solar power, raising people's energy bills even higher than they are now, refusing extra support for struggling families and pensioners, and paying for a policy with higher taxes on our children instead of a windfall tax on fossil fuels. These are the wrong choices.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I start by saying may God bless our Queen? Yeah. I welcome today's announcement very sincerely. I think it's fantastic that we've seized this massive problem facing us, and it will give huge relief to so many households and businesses who have quite frankly been terrified by the prospect of what was to come, and so having that reassurance now will be greatly pleasing to them, I'm convinced. I did want to just take a couple of minutes, however, to talk about some really low-hanging fruit that I don't think we've made enough of yet, and with current energy prices where they are, there's a lot more that we could do as a government. For example, by going house to house through energy suppliers, not as government officials, but assist people with looking at how they can reduce their own energy bills. And there are many, many practical ways, not least of which some great ideas for turning down the thermostat on your boiler. Don't do this yourselves at home, but nevertheless, turning that down to make more effective our use of energy. And secondly, things like turning down the hot water tap pressure to actually reduce people's energy bills. These things are really low-hanging fruit that you could do tomorrow, and that forecasters suggest could save up to 10% of energy bills. But most importantly of all is insulation. And again, current energy prices are a game changer for insulation. And some research recently out suggests that £1,000 could pay for the basic cavity wall or loft insulation for the average household, and that the sector could insulate up to 500,000 homes this winter and 1 million homes next year. And that actually would in itself potentially be cost neutral to the Treasury, because of course then the Treasury won't be paying the excess to pay for the price cap. So with energy prices at these levels, it is worth looking again at massively ramping up insulation at household level. And then finally, I won't give way because there's so little time, finally, in terms of businesses, so many have said to me as business secretary and then as chairman of the Backbench Bays Committee, so many businesses say to me, but we can't get a grid connection for our solar panels, so there's no point doing it. Again, I would say to them, with energy prices where they are, you can get yourselves a battery. You could actually have some internal independence in energy, and I think many businesses should be looking at that. And the role of government should be to provide advice through the energy suppliers. Thank you.
Yeah.
Florence Eshlomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I just wanted to echo the comments of my honourable friend from Swansea East with regard to dialysis patients. My late mum was a dialysis sufferer due to her sickle cell, and she dialysed 3 times a week. And one of the reasons she didn't want to switch to home dialysis was because of the costs. So I know that many sickle cell patients who have to have their heating on this winter, and many dialysis patients will be worrying so much about how they will pay their bills. In terms of what the Prime Minister announced earlier this morning, for my constituents in Vauxhall, the next 2 years will be fraught with so many difficulties without the right actions from this government, and the decisions they have made today will impact them for many years to come. And I hope that the Prime Minister and the new government will have this in mind when they make decisions over the next few years. Madam Deputy Speaker, solving the energy crisis is the first test of this new government. Are they going to make big decisions on the oil and gas firms that are making record profits while people up and down this country continue to suffer? Are they going to be fiscally responsible, doing everything in their power to ensure that it lowers the burdens on future generations? Are they going to support families who are already making desperate ends between putting food on the table or heating their homes? I'm afraid to say, on the basis of the announcements we've seen this afternoon and what we've heard from the government, the answer is a resounding no. For many of my constituents in Vauxhall, the cost of living crisis did not start when Ofcom raised the price cap last month. For many of them, it didn't even start when Russia invaded Ukraine earlier this year. The squeeze that they've been seeing in their wages and not keeping up with the prices has been the feature of this government over the last few years. Households have been squeezed relentlessly over decades, and with statistics from the Truss showing that over 20,000 food parcels were distributed in Lambeth between April 2019 and March 2020. The shock of the energy crisis has been severe, but we can't keep ignoring the fact that a number of households have been left in this position as their bills continue to sky high. We can't ignore the fact that the failure to insulate homes, the warm front discount introduced by the Labour government. But what do we get from this government? We get the rule book ripped up on fracking while people continue to not see untapped onshore wind potential. We get attack on workers' rights, people taken to lose a day's pay, or in some cases more, to fight for their wage increase and their workers' rights. We see scraps of policy on insulation on our homes as our homes continue to bleed the energy they need, bearing the hallmark of the incompetence of the last 12 years of this Conservative government. Madam Deputy Speaker, we can't afford to go on like this. Enough is enough. And we need a sea change from this government to recognise the issues that people in Vauxhall and up and down this country are facing. We need a sea change and we need a new government.
Chris Green.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister, her statement today, setting out 2 broad areas. Firstly, the immediate support she's going to be giving so many people right around the country, and also to businesses like many here, perhaps all here. Many constituents of mine have been getting in touch to say how concerned they are about the cost of energy now and how fearful they are about the cost of energy this coming winter. So the decisive action the Prime Minister's taken is incredibly welcome. But I'd like also to highlight the longer-term vision that she has. We know that much of the problems at the moment are caused by the invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin and the Russian army. But we also look back to the 1970s and the oil crisis, so we can see if we are dependent upon foreign sources of energy for our heating our homes and powering our industry, we're always going to be in a vulnerable place. So I welcome the Prime Minister's ambition for the United Kingdom to have Britain become a net exporter of energy by 2040. I think this is a hugely positive ambition for the United Kingdom, for our industry, and also for the sector itself. And I'd particularly like to emphasise one aspect of the energy sector. I think nuclear needs to form a key part of our energy sector in the United Kingdom. It's that reliable baseload energy we can depend upon come rain or shine. The northwest of England, whether in Cheshire, Lancashire, Cumbria, the northwest of England has a huge talent right across those three counties in the sector, and by investing in this and giving us more security in the sector, we're going to be protecting and securing those jobs. And I'm just thinking as well of Springfields near Preston, the nuclear fuels plant there. We need the security for that plant to ensure it can maintain itself and maintain its staff, the skilled engineers, the skilled apprentices in that site. We need to secure that site and many other places in the northwest of England. Warrington and the wider area, I think, as well, has an enormous wealth of talent. Happy to give way.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Does the Honourable Member share my concern about one of the announcements around fracking? I'm quite confident that my community won't accept that. And I know certainly the Honourable Member's constituency of Bolton West and those beautiful rural meadows surrounding it. Does he feel that he'll accept that as well?
The Prime Minister is committed to respecting the views and values of local communities, and I support that. But I'm trying to focus on nuclear energy in my short period of time I have to contribute. And I think the other aspect, both in the North West, we want that commitment, but also Hinkley C. That's a phenomenal site, a phenomenal investment in our United Kingdom. And I want to see our commitment to nuclear energy and the phenomenal workforce in that site in Hinkley C in Somerset. I want to see that workforce go on to the next nuclear project and a whole series of nuclear projects, whether it's the full-scale nuclear reactors or whether it's the SMRs. So I think there's a huge potential. I think there's a huge ambition that the Prime Minister is going to set out and the Business Secretary is going to give more details on. And this is immensely positive for so many different parts of our country, and I particularly welcome as well the location of Rolls-Royce SMR headquarters in the city of Manchester as well.
Order. Just before we move on, absolutely no problem with there being interventions. However, I would advise sticking to the 3 minutes, because obviously that not everybody is going to necessarily get in. So interventions do mean that the speaker gets an extra minute, which means it's an extra minute of somebody else. So please take interventions, but I would really appreciate it if the colleagues then stuck to the 3 minutes. Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I echo the best wishes to Her Majesty. The new Prime Minister takes up her role at a moment when the country is facing a series of multiple crises of staggering proportions, including a likely recession and, let's not forget, the accelerating climate emergency, which, in the words of the IPCC, means that there is, and I say, a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future. So this moment required bold, visionary thinking, grounded in compassion, not cold and outdated economic dogma. It called for a retrofit revolution, a massive investment in the home insulation and renewable energy upgrades that could finally deliver warm homes and lower bills. I was staggered that the Prime Minister didn't mention once those demand-side measures that need to be put into the communities around our country so that people can finally have lower bills and warmer homes. What it did not call for were measures that would lock us into further dependence on fossil fuels. Because while Putin's war in Ukraine has accelerated this crisis, it is fundamentally one caused by our dependence on gas, and it won't be solved by extracting more gas, and it certainly won't be solved by a resumption of fracking, which would be a disaster for the climate, and a measure which, as her own Chancellor admitted barely 6 months ago, would do nothing to lower energy bills and would fail to produce enough gas to meet even 1% of our needs for more than the next 3 years. Coming to the detail of her support package, I welcome the fact that she has finally acted on a price freeze, but will fail to protect millions of low-income families who are already in freefall. They can't cope with current prices, never mind an increase. And that's why my party would return the price cap to its more affordable rate of last October. These measures do nothing to incentivise a reduction in demand, energy demand for those who can do that. And most staggering of all, as we've heard so much, they allow the oil and gas companies to get off scot-free despite the Treasury's own documents showing that energy producers are in line to make 170 billion in excess profits over the next 2 years. So what we need to do is to scrap the shameful investment allowance, put in a windfall tax that is proportionate to the crisis that we face, and make that the first step towards a permanent carbon tax on oil and gas companies to reach, at the very least, the global average of 70%. That would bring the UK in line with countries such as Angola and Trinidad. I want to say I welcome the fact that the government has been consulting on decoupling the price of renewables from gas. That would be a game-changing step. But I also want to ask her to do a massive investment in renewable energy. Renewables are a staggering 9 times cheaper than gas. There are 650 wind and solar projects oven-ready and waiting. That is the way forward, not putting us into more and more fossil fuels. And finally, will the government look at measures like a rising block tariff approach, which would be much fairer into the future?
Stephen Crabb.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and while the thoughts of the House are first and foremost with Her Majesty the Queen this afternoon, I do think it's important that we take the opportunity to debate these challenges today. I welcome the speed with which the government has moved to bring forward a very strong package of measures that have been announced today. I welcome the substance of that package. I think it provides a very strong platform to help get families through this immediate price crisis. For me, it meets the test of scale, it meets the test of timeliness, and it provides certainty for those families who've been living in a state of, frankly, anxiety, thinking about the enormous bills that have been coming their way. I welcome the assurance from the Prime Minister today that this package will cover everybody, so there won't be gaps. It will cover the more than 50% of households in my constituency who have homes that are off the gas grid and rely on heating oil and LPG. I also want to make are able to access the support that they need, and there shouldn't be gaps. I still think, Madam Deputy Speaker, there will be further measures that we will need to take to strengthen some of the social protection for those on the very lowest incomes, despite the measures that have been announced today. I think there are some easy wins for the government around freezing or limiting the deductions that we take from people's social security payments. I think we should look again at the benefit cap, and I think most importantly, it would be good for this new administration to reiterate the commitment of the last government to do a full social security uprating in the new year. I think it's important, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the measures also cover businesses. I've heard from so many small businesses in my constituency during the summer, particularly the food manufacturers, breweries, so many hospitality and tourism businesses, who for them, frankly, this is an existential issue. These are good businesses, but if prices go the way that are being predicted, frankly, thousands of companies, good companies up and down the country and all of our constituencies will be put out of business. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the measures announced today around strategy for improving UK energy supply, I do strongly welcome these. A number of members have raised different energy sources they want to see more movement on. I would just flag up, Madam Deputy Speaker, the enormous opportunity that's opening up in the Celtic Sea with floating offshore wind. I think this is a really good, timely moment for the government working with the Crown Estate to accelerate progress on these projects. But none of that is an immediate answer. None of these new nuclear power stations that some members want to see. In terms of the immediate levers available to government for this winter and a potential energy supply crisis, there aren't many, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we are looking at gas supply, and I would really encourage the government to really sharpen its strategy around procurement of more LNG cargoes, making sure that we can guarantee that we get the energy coming into our system to keep the lights on this winter.
Lloyd Russell-Moyle.
Madam Deputy Speaker, some of the announcements are welcome, particularly a focus on people who are not on the grid. I would like to highlight to the front bench, and I do hope that they will go away and seek more clarity, for people who resell energy, often landlords in blocks who buy the energy on the commercial market and resell it to their tenants. It's never been explicitly mentioned by the government. They've talked about heat networks, which is if the landlord is running a boiler, but not if you are supplying the electricity directly to that flat. those meters are not on the official meter grid. They will not be eligible for the £400 support from this government even at the moment, unless action is taken. There needs to be some urgent action there to ensure that the landlords can purchase the prices at fair prices and they pass them on. At the moment, the landlord has to pass it on at the purchase price. I'm not saying landlords are gouging, but there is a problem that the purchase price is a commercial price, not a residential price. So I do hope that they will come back with further clarity on that. But the reality is that this package still is a £500 increase on what energy bills are today. Yes. This is not a reduction, this is an increase, and it didn't need to be like this. It didn't need to be like this because we could have regulated the wholesale market price, and the government could have stepped in and offered loans to energy companies to bridge the gap for the gas that they are importing. That could have been the offer, where the debt was put on the energy companies, not on the state, but that wasn't what has been put forward today. We could have seen the government fixing energy prices at what they are today and making interventions, but they didn't see that either. And so there are some real difficulties with this about who pays. Is it the profits of the companies, or is it the backs of the people? And I'm afraid the wrong choice has been made, because future generations, and even this generation in future years, will be paying for this, and that does not seem right to me. And of course, there were some slight mentions around improvements of efficiencies, but not enough. We need, as my honourable friend has been calling for actually, in my neighbour, a house-to-house, street-by-street approach for insulation and for getting this right. It does not work letting it down to the market. You do not get the efficiencies of scale. Labour has put forward a plan to start that, but it needs even more ambition. And we need to also be looking at the production of wind onshore, not just offshore, onshore, and solar panels on our roofs. At the moment, the solar panel feed-in tariff is less than the cost of buying energy directly from the market. That does not work. We need to reverse that. The incentive needs to be that people are paying into the grid at a fair market price that they are paying out.
Order. Claire Coutinho.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. All summer, like many of you in this House, I've been hearing from households, businesses, schools and other public sector organisations, community centres who've been worried about their energy bills going up fivefold in many cases. So I warmly welcome both the speed of this package and this ambition of this package, which I think will bring much certainty to businesses and peace of mind to households and others. I also welcome that we were very clear, I think, about the discretionary funding that will be provided for users of heating oil, of which I've got many people in my constituency, and also the reform of the electricity pricing market, so non-gas power producers are more fairly priced, therefore lowering the cost for many users as well. And the clarity which I think has been provided for those who are switching contracts and will not face exit penalties, I think will again be very positive for many. Instinctively, I would prefer a targeted support programme. However, I will say from the work that I've been doing for the last 12 months and longer in the Treasury looking at cost of living, there are challenges with that approach in that we know where all the people are who use energy, we know where all the people are who are on benefits, but we don't know much about those middle income people. We did try through a council tax band approach to target a bit more, but it's imperfect. So I think actually the universal approach they've adopted here is the right one, because we cannot let middle income households go to the wall. And the truth is, when you have energy prices going up by so much, there are many people who are outside of the benefit system who maybe on £30,000, £40,000 would be hugely struggling right now without this programme. However, we cannot deny that there are problems when you distort price signals through price controls, and therefore I was very pleased to hear the Prime Minister talk about energy efficiency and energy security and supply, which will be critical if we get through this period. And lastly, I just wanted to come back on this windfall tax point that's been mentioned multiple times by the opposition, the £170 billion, which they know those profits are not being made here and are not taxable. And the reason I know they know that is they set out their own plans a week ago, and actually they only wanted to recoup £8 billion from the oil and gas companies. So if they really truly thought there was £170 billion up for grabs, and we know how much they love grabbing profits, why did they not set out 20, 30, 50, even £100 billion? It's because they know that's not possible. And actually we did put forward, an increase in their taxes. And oil and gas companies are paying not the 19% corporation tax that other companies are paying, not even the 40% that they pay normally, but 65%, two-thirds of their profits are coming into the tax system. And as much as possible that they can invest the rest of it, that's what we will need for long-term solutions to protect our households, our businesses, our schools, our charities and more.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Under Prydarydd, mi hoffwn yn anfon dymuniad agorau I yw Marodi y Frenhines. I too would like to send my best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen. Today's announcement shows beyond doubt whose side the new Prime Minister is on. She's prepared to force taxpayers to carry the burden of borrowing billions of pounds in order to subsidise the shareholders of energy companies who are profiting from Putin's war. And it's shocking she can't even tell us how much that burden is going to cost today. I must urge her to think again. Make energy companies pay their fair share. The global energy norm of energy profit taxation is 70%. Norway stands at 78%. Why does the population of the UK have to suffer the combined yokes of higher taxes, worse public services and falling real wages while private profit is protected under her premiership? Use that money to return the energy price cap to the pre-April level of £1,277 per year and extend that cap to small businesses and charities. People are struggling now. Even at current prices, 180,000 households in Wales are forced to struggle even to afford items such as heating, food and toiletries. Bills of £2,500 are unaffordable for many, many people. Anything short of £1,277 as a cap will fail to meet the scale of the crisis we face. And it will require her government, and this is important, to bring forward additional packages of support for vulnerable households, including doubling the £650 cost of living payment and revising the eligibility criteria to include those on disability benefits who are currently excluded from support. This will cost us more in future if we don't face what is genuinely facing us now. But, of course, what we're calling on her here is instead of pursuing fantasy economics of rampant deregulation and tax cuts for the rich, the Prime Minister must also prioritise reduction in energy demand and investment in low-carbon sources. That's the only way to bring down energy bills in the medium and long term. Finally, and to be clear and simple on this, it is time to unchain Wales's renewable and low-carbon energy potential by vastly improving our grid capacity, bringing forward SMRs at Truss in my constituency and Wilver and other places as well, empowering Welsh Government to deliver large-scale transformative infrastructure projects such as tidal lagoons, devolving management of the Crown Estate to Wales and enabling community energy schemes to realise their full potential by selling their power directly to local customers. For us in Wales, it is now clear that in the long term, to fix this crisis for good, we must place our energy system and its huge potential in the hands of the people of Wales for the benefit of the people of Wales.
Dean Russell.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and given the announcement earlier, may I also send my best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen from myself and also from all those across Watford. The announcement today, I felt, was a very important one. Over the summer, I spent lots of time volunteering with organisations, including the Citizens Advice Bureau, through to working in the British Heart Foundation shop, and I heard firsthand the challenges that people are feeling around the fears that they have around the fuel crisis and their bills. And what we heard today was a significant package which will help people immediately, but also deal with the long-term challenges that we face, whilst also making sure economically that it does work. Because as we all know, windfall taxes are a one-off, potentially a two-off, if you could call it that. But once you get to the third or fourth try, it's not going to work. And so what we need is something that works immediately, long-term, but also puts us on a competitive footing around the world. And what we did here today, which I thought was a really
What is that? What? Sorry.
on any particular day. So I think those kind of show us one key thing, and that is the Queen to carry out that role of hers, send off her point out see how far you get. Is a key part of her role as a constitutional monarch. She was being so keen to make sure that she...
But see, once you finish our photo, we get you just to go over back up and onto this side, just for comments, just to press, but alright. No worries. Okay. Just back up and then on this side where these people are, alright?
Oh, sure.
Just on the other side of the road, aye.
I was like, didn't you just get this one?
Yeah, so Harry and Meghan have been here in the UK all week up in Manchester on Monday. They went to Düsseldorf and Germany and did the Australian engagements. On Tuesday, Wednesday was a free day for them in theory. We understand that they stayed at Windsor from their cottage, which is just a few kilometres or even closer to Adelaide Cottage in the Candy District. Now, it's being reported here that they didn't see each other, those two families. Harry would have known about the Queen's health earlier in the week. There is no doubt that he's now been advised of the